We good to go, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for it to load up, and then I'll let you know. Just going through the settings.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good to go.
Lovely stuff. Right. Good evening, everybody. I'll start with the introductory remote meeting. This is a meeting of the council which is being held remotely. The meeting is being held and recorded and streamed via YouTube, where members of the public are able to watch the meeting. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the council's YouTube page during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the council. The recording will be available on the council's website following the meeting. All members have been provided with remote committee guidance notes prior to this meeting. Please can these be adhered to during the remote meeting? Points include all mobile phones set to silent. Please set your profile to mute unless you are speaking. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand so that I can recognise you. For each item, officers will present a report, then the committee will discuss it, after which the group leaders, deputy group leaders present, they will be asked if they have any comments to make. But the last part doesn't really apply because we've got no other group leaders here. Right, so apologies for absence. I understand there are none, Sarah.
That's correct.
Right. Declarations of interest. I think to be on the safe side, I was say me and Councillor Jeff Henry are Essex County councillors. So it might be something might come up under item 7 with regards to the food banks. Right, then we go to the minutes on pages 5 to 18. So this is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting being held on the 15th of September. We shall deal with that one first. Is there any guest councillor?
Thank you, Chair. It's a comment on the minutes which makes me uncomfortable because we've got a house style in respect to the minutes, but we usually don't have verbatim quotes from councillors. Often we don't even name councillors, but in the minutes of the 23rd of September, Councillor McGurran is mentioned and quoted at length. His quote is even larger than some of the reports we've received in the pack. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but I just wanted to say I think that needs to be actually reflect the House style and amended accordingly.
Okay. Councillor Rimmer, the officers will have heard your comments and acted accordingly. This is for correction of minutes and make sure there's no errors.
I think that's an error, is it not?
Well, that will be for the people who took down the notes. You're very welcome to vote against, for, or abstain. Is there any comments on that particular meeting?
Is the officer going to respond to that? Sorry, Kerry.
Councillor Rimmer, the officers heard your comments and will duly act accordingly as they see fit. I don't tell officers how to take the minutes, and they will do the minutes as they see feel best. What this part of the meeting is for is to check the accuracy of the minutes. So is there any other further comments on the meeting held on the 15th of September? No, so I shall put it to the vote. I will call each member out accordingly as it says on the front page of the agenda. Councillor Gold, can everyone unmute themselves first?
I support the minutes, Chairman. I support the minutes.
Councillor Henry?
Support the minutes, Chairman.
Councillor Rimmer?
I'm going to abstain. Not happy.
Councillor Schrader?
In favour.
Sorry, I caught you drinking a cup of tea, sorry. Councillor Cook?
In favour.
And I am in favour too. So 4 in favour, 5 in favour and 1 abstention. Then I shall go to the meeting held on the 23rd of September. Are there any comments? I shall go against the vote, so please unmute yourself, everybody. Councillor Golden?
Yep, I support.
Councillor Henry?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
Abstain.
Councillor Schrader?
In favour.
Councillor Cook?
In favour.
So, Sarah, that is 5 in favour and 1 abstention on the minutes. Now, I'm going to play around with the agenda items and go straight to item 6 because we've got 2 senior officers here from Basildon / Essex Police, and their time is exceedingly precious because we'd like them back out doing what they need to do to keep the borough safe in these tough times. So, if we go to pages 29, and I believe, Paula, you're leading on this agenda item.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, to Abstract, the committee has been asked to consider the progress of Safer Basildon over the last year, as outlined in both the annual report, which was enclosure number 2, and in the committee report, to note the extension of the current strategy to 2022 and the approach going forward. I don't intend to go through the report in detail as it was quite lengthy, but I will pass over to Carol Burton to provide an update on antisocial behaviour at Pitsea Library.
Thank you, Paula. It was just to follow up from my email to members in mid-November, just to confirm that we have held a meeting with the supervisor at Pitsea Library early October, and obviously reassuring it's been confirmed that they haven't had any further issues at the library, although there are a number of new staff there. The COVID restrictions obviously have helped in this issue. They have had issues with street drinkers loitering outside, and the sergeant for the community policing team, which part of Inspector Parry's team, has confirmed that her officers, when they are in the area, they will move any street drinkers outside the library, which has obviously reassured the staff in the library. Most recent sort of communication in early November has confirmed it's been very quiet around there, but they have agreed to maintain regular contact, and obviously we will continue to work closely with them in case there are any issues that arise as the restrictions across the country are relaxed. So then I'll pass over if there's any questions for the committee for the police representatives and ourselves to answer.
As always, first hand up, Councillor Rimmer, you have the floor.
Thank you. I've got a number of points and questions. It's good to see the work in respect to the library and the liaising that's taking place there. So thank you, Carol, on that. The issue of street drinking, you raised that, and it's reflected in the report as well, I believe, when it's actually looking at the public space, public order for Basildon in respect of alcohol and drinking alcohol. And I was wondering if we should be looking at something similar for Pitsea as well, because street drinking is an issue generally in Pitsea town centre and the underpass, and it's quite dangerous walking. People feel intimidated walking in the underpasses sometimes if there are alcoholics there just drinking away, and a lot of them haven't been, going by the rule of 6 or any of the other rules that we've had to abide by. There's been gatherings of about 9 or so at times drinking alcohol there. So that was one of my points on there. There were some questions, and I don't know if this is for the officers or the police on this. It was to do with the hate.
Without being rude, may I cut you there so the officers and our council staff can deal with the very serious point you made about Pitsea? Then when you're happy with the outcome, we'll progress to your next point. Do you mind?
Yeah, happy to do it that way, Chair. I didn't know if you wanted me to go all the questions first, but we'll do it that way.
Yeah, we'll slice it up. Paula?
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, so the Public Spaces Protection Order is borough-wide, so it will include Pitsea Town Centre. It's including Pitsea, Wickford, Billericay, Langdon and Basildon town centres. And it's covering all of the parks and the open spaces. So it's not just for Basildon Town Centre. The public consultation is currently out on that. So if members could share that, that would be really helpful. We've currently got 374 responses to that. And it's been live just over a week. So we are promoting that weekly. So just encourage members to promote that as well.
What's mine gone on?
Well, that's good to hear, and it's good to hear that's been applied to Pitsea as well. So that's great, and the response rate sounds great as well. I noticed in the report itself that when looking at hate crime, that it said that 52% of victims of hate crime were uncooperative. So there's a question around that. I think there might be a number of small ones here, Chair, if you indulge me, that might be worth asking together.
Just 1 second, Councillor Rimmer. Can everyone mute themselves? Because it sounds like someone's attacking the Christmas tree with all the baubles on. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Rimmer.
That's okay. So there was a question around that. I was also concerned in terms of the domestic abuse statistics, in terms of how many that had actually been solved. When it was talking about the highest, most egregious forms of domestic abuse, it was at 29.5%, and the medium it had increased, which is good, at 25.4%, but it still feels a bit too low in terms of the solving of such a serious crime in terms of domestic abuse. So it was trying to get a bit of unpacking of that. I mean, tied into that in terms of the council, obviously looking at Essex as a whole, or South Essex as a whole, Basildon does seem to have the most, in the mid 200s, wasn't it, in terms of actual domestic abuse victims. And I'm just wondering why we've only been able to find 21% of them refuge places, according to the report, and whether that could be unpacked a little bit to understand what's happened to the other 79% in terms of finding them suitable accommodation on this. There was also,
Councillor Emma,
I think, yeah, there's a few questions. There are some more I have as well.
can we deal with that point? Then you've got as much time as you need for the other questions, because
Thank you, Chair.
you've raised a very serious point. Leslie?
Sorry, lost the mute button. Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably worth saying at that point that having spoken to the officers working in the hub, they have said that they are increasingly seeing a number of victims who they don't want alternative accommodation, which is a good thing. So, people don't want to be uprooted from their homes and necessarily go into refuge or alternative accommodation in or out of the borough. They are looking at different measures. So it could be using the sanctuary scheme through target hardening and allowing people to remain in their own homes. So that's where those figures come from, Councillor Rimmer.
Councillor Emma, did you want to come back on Leslie's point before you make progress with the other points?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, no, that's good to, it's good to hear that there are people who are actually still finding other accommodation. It would be quite useful maybe to have a small update at some point, even if that's emailed around, just to give those figures of what's happening to the other 79%, just because it's good to have that reassurance and obviously know where we are in terms of the overall picture, the problem that's been set and what we're trying to achieve going forward, especially when we go to my next question as well, which is to do with the theory of change, which Sarah helpfully sent through a clearer version of, and actually what it's looking to do. We're looking to extend this Safer Basildon initiative, but in the theory of change, it doesn't seem to have any timescale set to the short-term, mid-term, long-term objectives. And I'm wondering if we could actually expand on that and have a more detailed version that's actually setting some target dates for these things and having some more measurable targets in there as well. Obviously, we've had crime increasing in these areas that we've identified, that we want fewer crimes, and an end outcome is fewer crimes. I want to know what are we benchmarking those fewer crimes against, and how many fewer crimes do we want as a target? Because it's good to have that in, as part of the theory of change, to actually get change. And the other thing I was interested in as part of this theory of change was actually obviously that long-term outcome is about people feeling safer and being more resilient, which is great. But I think part of that may be about perception of crime as well. And should there also be some activity in this theory of change in terms of outputs, which actually is looking to tackle the perception of crime, or at least have initiatives in there that have a built environment or that actually make people feel safer as well, because obviously part of it, as the police probably well know, is when they sort of publicize great coups of getting all these knives picked up, people go, oh gosh, that was in our community. And it only sort of heightens the fear of crime when actually they've taken more bad guys off the street.
Sorry, Councillor, is that all of your questions?
Yeah, it was around the theory of change and drilling down into that, yes.
Paula?
Leslie put her hand up.
Sorry, your picture's a bit blurred, Leslie. Go for it, Leslie, please.
Sorry. No, I was just going to respond really in terms of the domestic abuse and those figures. We can certainly get those across to Councillor Rimmer. I can tell you now that the others will be around either sanctuary or we've just given support and advice at that time. The people, the victims did not want alternative accommodation, but we'll get that across to you. And I'm going to be really naughty now because I'm going to call on Chris really in terms, because he's very good with crunching the numbers and talking about the statistics and driving those, you know, the KPIs that we've got and driving the crime figures down. So Chris, do you want to respond to Councillor Rimmer on that point?
Of course I can. Thanks, Leslie. Good evening, everyone. Where do I start, Councillor Rimmer? I'm going to start with the last point you made around perception of crime. You're a man after my own heart. I absolutely agree with you in relation to how we have to be very careful with our communications. We've got something like 14,000 people following us on our Essex Police Basildon Facebook page. And when I arrived, I was very conscious about how much we were putting on there about the finding of knives, the finding of drugs, and how much that is driving misinforming people about the perception of crime in the area. Over the last, about October last year, so nearly a year ago now, we did some survey work and we got to understand that the fear of crime amongst people on our social media feeds was much higher than that of the general population. Essex Police surveys the general population every quarter, and we get those results fed through to us. And we found that those following our social media feeds were far more negative. What we do know is the people directly following us on social media also share our content, and it gets, it proliferates across the borough. So we changed our approach. Now, I encourage you to go and have a look at our Facebook feed for the last 12 months. I can't stop it all. I can't see every single post that goes out from my teams, but we certainly have tried to change that approach. And I've already mentioned about the survey work that the Force does and the promising moves we've seen in the last 12 months. So in the year ending September 2019, when we asked residents whether they felt crime and ASB had become more of a problem in their area in the last 12 months, 40% were saying that they believed it had. So that was in the 12 months to September 19. In the 12 months to September 20, that figure's gone down to 29%, which is a significant reduction. It's a statistically significant reduction. I think COVID will have had part to play in the way people feel about crime and ASB in the area, but I also hope that is as a result of changing our approach to try and stop that fear-mongering, for want of a better term, around our sort of public communications. And it's important that we have that honest conversation with people about what's happening with crime and antisocial behaviour in their area. The vast majority of areas we see crime or ASB dropping, which is positive. That takes me kind of full circle back to some of your initial points about domestic abuse. I think the solved rate, I would always want to solve more crime. That's the policeman's instinct, if you like, of, if someone reports something to us, we want to solve it. You'll have noted from the report that the rates of solved crime in this area are higher than elsewhere in Essex Police. So it's a good start to pretend that we are solving more crime than elsewhere. But it is also important to point out that not all victims, in fact, an awful lot of victims, when they report things to the police, don't want us to take it through the criminal justice system. So we, just to give you a typical incident, we'll get called in an emergency situation because they need us there now. There's a disturbance happening. We'll arrive, we'll calm things down, we'll perhaps remove a party from the scene by either arresting them or taking them somewhere else, dependent on what's being reported to us. And at that point, very often we find that victims say, "That's all I wanted from you. I just wanted you to solve the matter here." Now, I would expect my officers in those circumstances to work with the victims to try and get them to understand that, at some point we need to stop this, and a way of doing that is through the criminal justice system. And we are working very hard with our local policing teams who predominantly respond to that type of incident to improve how good we are at giving people the confidence to work with us and to support an investigation that allows us to get it to court. So we will continue. I'm absolutely saying we will continue to strive to improve our response to that. But it's never as simple as it seems. It feels intuitively wrong that only 30% of a case, where we of course always know who the offender is, that's a difference in this type of offending, that doesn't feel right. But like I say, most of that is due to victims not wanting us to proceed. And because of the type of crime type with domestic abuse, of course, what we don't want to appear is that the police are then trying to control and coerce them into supporting a prosecution to make our figures look better. So it's a very fine balance to be had, I think. And that goes across to the hate crime area as well that you mentioned. About 18 months ago now, we decided that our community policing team would investigate hate crime on the basis that we wanted the cops that had the better links in, the better engagement with the community would be investigating that type of crime. And they absolutely try their hardest. Steve runs that team. He does scrutiny into the investigations on a monthly basis to look at them and to see if we're doing them to the standard that we need to. And we sometimes find mistakes. We find that in all walks of life. But on the whole, we're doing the best we possibly can. So that's probably all I can say around the solved element that you mentioned. I think that kind of covers most of the areas, but I'll pause because I know I've been talking for a while for follow-up.
I didn't know if you were, and because you were tasked with the number crunching, Chris, I didn't know if you would be brave enough to set targets for what fewer crimes would actually look like and what we're benchmarking that against as part of that theory of change.
Really good question. So there's an initial bit of concern I have around that. Domestic abuse is one of the most concerning crimes we have in terms of we don't feel like we get the level of reporting that we should. It's a very underreported crime to the police. So whenever I observe crime rates around domestic abuse, I do so with absolute caution. If you see an increase, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it could mean that more people have confidence to come forward to us and report the matter, which makes it really complex. How do we understand if we're doing better, and how do we understand if it's just that there's more of it happening, or it's because more people are reporting it to us? I promise you, we've grappled with this at senior levels within the police for years. Something that I think I can't give a specific answer now, but that I can work with officers from the council on is the best measure is probably around the repeat victimisation element. So once someone has had that initial confidence to report to us, we do monitor how many of those victims go on to be victims again. But even then, it is difficult, because it might be we did a great job of responding to it the first time, and that's why they've reported it to us again. So it's tough, is my answer, but I'll certainly take away the action to speak with officers in the council to work out how we can perhaps put something numerical around that. I would always personally want to steer away from arbitrary targets, if I'm honest, but we certainly need to have the data to be able to say what's happening, and at least be able to explain why we believe what's happening is happening.
So that's good. On the Essex Special Services Agreement, obviously we as an administration, when we were in, political point there for you, Kerry, we had agreed for, sorry, Mr. Chairman, we'd actually funded for free community police officers, and I think Essex came in and funded an extra free, and I think the knife archers were part of this as well. And there's a note there about August 2021 and the agreement coming to an end then. What happens after that? Is that something that's just picked up by the funding? Obviously, there are other increases coming through for police numbers nationally as well.
So Leslie O'Shea and I picked up this point last week and said we need to discuss what the plan is for that, because from my perspective, I'd love to come back to you with a proposal with the results we've had from the first, it won't be quite 2 years, but just under 2 years, and clearly be saying, I think this is something we could continue to support. But that will be a conversation for us, in terms of bringing that back to you. If that's not supported, what would happen then is I've got some difficult decisions to make. The funding has allowed me to play around with my community policing team in order to reintroduce localised policing, which I'm absolutely passionate about. So I now have a team responsible for policing, under a sergeant responsible for policing Pitsea and Vange, one for Billericay and Wickford, one for Basildon and Langdon, and then separately to that, the town centre team. That ownership, from my perspective, is brilliant. If I have an issue in Pitsea, I can give it to Sergeant Pentelow, and she owns it. Whereas before we didn't have that structure because we simply didn't have enough resources to make it happen. So that would be for me to look very carefully about how I can perhaps move some things around elsewhere. But I don't think I think it would affect it, and we'd have to start unpicking that structure if we weren't to continue to fund it in the same way. The growth that's coming in terms of the central government growth, the 20,000 extra cops across the country, that's gradually trickling through. An awful lot of that, I mean, it's on the Essex Police website and the Police Bar and Crime Commission's website about how that money is being invested. But certainly this year, there's been investment into local policing, community policing for the last few years. But this year, a lot of that is going into investigations areas. So we've just spoken about the increase in domestic abuse. Of course, that brings with it extra investigative demand, and therefore we're having to invest in those teams to ensure we get the response right there. So we're not seeing that lots of that funding going locally. I'm sure at some point we might get a chance to speak about the local community safety engagement officers, which was part of this year's increase in funding and the good work that they're doing. But that doesn't at the moment, the picture isn't looking like I can kind of use that to offset any funding that would disappear from the council.
I've got two final questions, Chair, if that's okay. And
if you quick, please, because there's other people waiting, please.
Of course, absolutely, Chair. And I was just going to, one feedback, Sergeant Pentelow is absolutely brilliant. She's done fantastic work on antisocial behaviour in my ward, and also in terms of the boy racers near Tesco's car park as well. So I think she's been fantastic. That's just some feedback you can give back if she's not watching. But I noticed that these great initiatives, education-wise, Walk Online and Crucial Crew, that they are the sort of ages 9 to 11, and you've got the parental engagement that's actually going alongside that as well. Is there any thought about expanding that program to look at other years? Because obviously there seems to be different online digital problems in terms of for teenagers in particular, and when they're actually starting to get into relationships and that sort of thing, and how that interplays with the internet. And the sort of second question was really about the knife archers. I noticed obviously one was placed in Whitford train station, one was placed in Basildon, and whether there'd been any thought to bring anything into Pitsea, because obviously we've had a number of knife incidents, and some of them involved people getting off the train from London, coming into Pitsea and stabbing somebody. So I was wondering if there was any thought about Pitsea train station as a possibility.
Shall I respond in respect of the early intervention and prevention? Yeah. So the Crucial Crew and Walk Online, yes, we have actually just delivered Walk Online virtually, and it was the most successful it's ever been. So we had a number of schools engaged, and young people one school had to close because of COVID. The year group had to work from home, and the young people actually logged in from home into that session. So that was really successful, and we run a parental engagement session last Thursday, and over 100 parents signed into that, which is the first time we've had that number of parents engaged, which has kind of encouraged us to look at that virtual programme now, which COVID has almost thrown us into, but actually it's really, we will plan now a series of sessions for parents. What we intend to do with the secondary schools is we would usually run an event around year 9, but we are intending to look at a programme around year 7s, so that the work and the messages that they get in year 5 and year 6, when they go to secondary school, once they've been there for about 6-7 months, we then go back in and deliver the same type of programme, but we ask them, have they been affected by the issues that they've were already found out about in year 6, so we can start to gauge whether they've been affected by criminal exploitation and so on and so forth. So yes, COVID has certainly made us look at the way we deliver, and it's actually made a significant difference to that. And does Steve want to respond about the knife arches, or Chris?
Yeah, certainly I can do. Thank you, Chair. Yes, knife arches have proven successful, certainly as a deterrent in the town centre location. Obviously, we had a deployment over in Wickford. Pitsea train station doesn't lend itself to an easy deployment of the knife archers, and we have to work very closely with British Transport Police because effectively it's within their jurisdiction rather than our own. That said, that is something we are prepared to do. We tend to roll out the knife arches when we've got specific national operations. So we have national waves of intensification around Operation Sceptre, where we'll undertake things like weapon sweeps, increased levels of stop and search in areas that are synonymous with knife crime. And the attack, the instance that you mentioned, just off the railway. Whilst they are concerning, they are not a regular occurrence, and so I think we can take some sort of confidence from that. But that said, I think, like you say, we should be looking at potentially some of the more residential areas where we could prop up the knife arches. But I am mindful of the fact if we see the knife arches, there are still those that will draw inference in terms of fear of crime. So it's a balance, but generally we can get away with a little bit more, certainly when we're looking at national weeks of action where we're publicising what we're doing. Hopefully that will answer you and give you some sort of reassurances that we are in Pitsea and we are conducting, but we don't always need that specific tool in that area due to how it's made up geographically.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Are there any other members wishing to speak? I can see Councillor Yacoub, Councillor Schrader, and then Mr. Wood. So is there any other? Oh, Councillor Golden. So we're going this order through councillors. Councillor Yacoub, Councillor Schrader, Councillor Golden, and then to Mr. Wood and anybody else. Councillor Yacoub, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions. The first one was around hate crime. I noticed that the statistics on the incidents against racially protected characteristics, they were not broken down. And I was wondering if we have specific statistics against groups of people based on their race, religion, for example. Do we have statistics on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia? And if so, I'd really like to see those. And also in terms of hate speech online, I think that although in general hate speech online may not be given as much resources, I feel like it does have an impact on just in general how a community feels and how people feel being part of the community. So I think it would be interesting to see if we have any statistics on that. And the second question I had was around the 4P approach and the early intervention. I noticed that there are accompanying parental engagement sessions, but one of the things I've heard from schools in the past is that it's really hard to get parents on board to actually attend. I know it's probably a little bit easier now doing it over Zoom, but in general and like for the future, are there any strategies that we can use to ensure that it's a kind of twofold approach where the workshops are being delivered to young people, but also that the engagement on the parental front, it happens as well?
I can certainly take the engagement. The parental engagement session that we run this week, last week, so that was an increase of, well, over 50% of parents that were engaged in that session. So we intend to run a programme. It makes no difference to us whether we run them on, we run them in the evening anyway, or whether we run them at the weekend, because we will usually commission somebody to deliver that. But that is our intention going forward, is to have a programme for parents.
Chair, if I may come in, certainly in respect of the hate crime, the various types of hate crime, those statistics are available and we can break those down. This isn't something that is ignored. Certainly, it's a topic of discussion when I attend the Independent Advisory Group on a regular basis. We do break down a lot of the data and discuss the different types of hate crime within the group. Off the back of the independent advisory group, we've got a couple of standalone pieces of work in the side-by-side project that we are heavily involved in, and also we've got a separate working group that is looking at hate speech, if you like, and we are picking up some of the online matters. Obviously, I've been made aware, especially in recent times, of reports around things that have appeared through Facebook, and we have got live investigation that we are looking at and progressing as we speak. So this is very much on the agenda. You know, I'm really keen that we have, certainly within the independent advisory group, we have a good representation from people of all protected characteristics, that we have a bunch of individuals that are keen to look at moving the group forward, so we can look at potentially some sort of task and finish type outcomes, as well as, you know, holding ourselves as police to account. I'm confident in what I've seen so far. There's been a real level of vibrancy in the last sort of couple of months about activity within that particular group. Only this week I've got a couple of appointments that meetings that are booked to discuss the very topic of the hate speech. So the aim is to improve public confidence in that particular area. As we say, we have got underreporting, it is likely, and in terms of solved sort of hate crime, again, an area where people aren't always wanting to go to court, very akin to domestics. This is something that we are trying to understand, but collectively through the partnership we're looking at as well. So hopefully that will give some confidence in that particular area for you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Has all your questions been answered, Councillor Coop?
Yeah, it would actually be really good if it could be brought back to committee to see an update on that. But yeah, thank you for your answer.
Is that possible, Sarah? We can have an update at a future committee on these points?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. We can schedule that in.
Thank you. Okay, we now go to Councillor Schrader, Councillor Golden and Mr Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. And I just like, as I've got him here, I'd just like to thank Chief Inspector Bradford and his officers for all their hard work during the pandemic and during these weird times that we find ourselves in. I would also praise the Facebook page. I think that, particularly given that we know that the public's perception of crime is very heavily influenced by what they're hearing and reading online. I personally, as a local councillor, have found the Essex Basildon Facebook feed quite a useful antidote to a lot of the perceptions that the public have, that, you know, the police are never about and we never see them, and that, you know, their perceptions of crime, I think, are countered a lot by what you can demonstrate by sharing the stories and the good news that's featured on that stream. I did just want to ask a question about the of course I've instantly lost the page that I've been keeping this whole time, the multi-agency tasking group. Do these encompass outside agencies that are outside the district, or the borough, I should say? I ask that specifically because, for example, so in my ward, we have an estate known as interchangeably as the Outward Common Estate or the Walthamstow Estate, a large portion of which, for reasons passing understanding, is owned by the London Borough of Waltham Forest. And so we have a lot of managed moves into that estate. And we have recently, I've been getting a lot of casework from residents in and around that estate, concerns about crime. And obviously it would be beneficial if Essex Police and, you know, the other local agencies here were liaising more directly with both Waltham Forest, but also with the Metropolitan Police, because I suspect that a lot of the problems that we're experiencing there may be as a consequence of managed moves, and those individuals may well already be known to both Waltham Forest and the Met, but not necessarily to Essex Police and to local services here.
Yep, Steve, if I can come in, Chair, thank you. It's a very, very good point, very well made, and something that thankfully I can positively report on. Yes, the estate that you mentioned was brought to our attention, sadly following some fairly significant and nasty incidents, a stabbing 2 or 3 months back. Off the back of that, we set the balls in motion to work with the housing providers, Waltham Forest Council. We managed to build a really good network and relationship with them as a provider. The issue, if you like, was taken into our multi-agency tasking group with a view to a wider responsibility around problem solving. So we looked at all those key individuals that had been named. We did a mapping exercise to identify who the key players were. Again, this went sort of beyond our district. It went around the partners in terms of those that would work with the youth element, those worked from my side, the schools officers. We worked with the secondary schools that were accommodating these youngsters who'd been moved out of area. My team that were based in the hub, the community hub, made arrangements to deal with the Metropolitan, so spoke to their gangs unit. We were then able to identify where they fitted and if they fitted in terms of previous intelligence, and that formed our picture in terms of how we were going to tackle it. Off that, we have the legacy insofar as we've now got a new and very healthy relationship with that team, and our information sharing is certainly, if not on a daily basis, is on a weekly basis, where we've got that willing exchange of information that we can task backwards and forwards to ensure that we've got a new picture of what's going on. So that as a piece of work, as a multi-agency piece of work, I think was very successful. Sadly, we did have individuals that were not too cooperative in terms of the investigation, but we were able to mitigate the risk. We were able to pass key addresses back to the accommodation provider, the housing provider, with a view to them doing their work around tenancy. But most importantly, it was something that had done, and I think at the moment, dare I say, touch wood, that particular area has quietened down following the combined activity of my team and wider agencies.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Schrader, any follow-up comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and I'm very grateful for that reply. That does give a lot of confidence. And I guess on the back of it, I mean, as you mentioned, there was a very unpleasant incident on that particular estate, but we did also have a similar incident in South Green, which is in the neighbouring ward, and then also there was a very nasty stabbing, I think about a year ago, in Lake Meadows, and there've been other similar sort of instances. So I suppose a bit like similar to my colleague Councillor Rimmer, I appreciate you're going to get requests from pretty much every councillor who's got a train station in their ward or near their ward for these knife arches. Now, obviously, you know, I appreciate that the rates of these kind of crimes in Billericay compared to elsewhere in the borough and indeed elsewhere in the county are such that we're probably not going to be high on your list. But you did mention some other sort of more targeted sort of tactical possibilities. So I would just ask if that could be put into the mix as some consideration, because like I say, we have those kind of instances are very, very unusual for Billericay, and it does have a lot of my residents very worried that we're seeing an increase in knife crime in and around the town.
Chair, if I may respond on that one.
Sure.
Yeah, obviously, as Mr. Bradford alluded to earlier on, we have geographical ownership for the various sub-districts. So Billericay sitting under Sergeant Jane Childs. It's my expectation that we are constantly scanning social media feeds, listening to the public. We've got greater visibility than we have had for a number of years in the high street areas and other areas of Billericay. So I'm hoping that my team are out there speaking and listening to people to get the views, the concerns. And then when they're getting that information, that we're bringing it back and we're looking to develop it onwards, whether it be through specific policing operations or such like. An example I can provide, only a couple of 3 months ago, we were seeing the warmer summer months when the nitrous oxide canisters were very much in vogue, certainly in our park areas. Youngsters were taking them. So a specific operation was launched off the back of that, working with the parks officers, working with wider council, outreach workers. We were able to get into the park to reduce that. So this was all of the back of local intelligence and responding to the concerns and the needs of the public. So absolutely, when we have incidents that reported to us, South Green and beyond, my plan is that we've always got something in our pocket that we can roll out to address and deal with those those issues robustly. And if they need to be escalated through to the multi-agency tasking group, that's exactly what we'll do for a wider problem-solving approach.
Lovely,
thank you, Chair.
Councillor Traynor, I'll see you indicating.
Sorry, yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got one final question, but I'm really grateful for that reply. Thank you very much. And if I can just say that Sergeant Childs is absolutely brilliant, and I think the engagement has never been better, frankly. She's really good. Right, but I did have one final point, which was on the public spaces protection order. Just really to ask a question about how effective they are, and given that they cover such a large area, what they really sort of add to, in terms of like adding to your arsenal of measures that you've got at your disposal. What's the value added of the PSPO? Specifically, I'm thinking of, so if I go back to the Waltham, the Outwood Common estate, so we get a lot of complaints about youths hanging around the outside Morris Avenue shops. So that's like, the green opposite. So presumably that would be covered by the PSPO, just like every other open space in the borough. But what's the actual tangible benefit to having the PSPO?
I think, Chair, if I may, there's, depending on what conditions we are able to apply to a PSPO. If we look at, as an example, Basildon High Street, we've got it should be a no alcohol zone. So when we find people with open canisters of alcohol, then we can remove them from them. Obviously, we've got a number of tools in our armoury already. We've got certain laws. If people are drunk, then obviously we deal with them. If we've got substantive offences, public order offences, then we can go down those lines. But some of the, I'll suggest, softer elements where we're still needing an interaction with people to actually, to stamp out the behaviour. This is something that, the PSPO would provide us with. We can't obviously go in and tell people to come, to get rid of their booze if there's no PSPO in place, unless of course they're drunk. We'll be arresting them for drunken offences. So it does give us those additional tools. Things like the nitrous oxide canisters, as we've mentioned before, whilst laws prevent us seizing them, as a condition within a PSPO, that will give us additional powers to perhaps confiscate and deal with that way. So depending on what we apply to it, and again, it's got to be measured and proportionate to, the needs and the concerns and the issues that are raised, would determine effectiveness at different levels. So dealing with young kids, we'd have to be very, very focused on what we could possibly do, and realistically we'll be better off targeting different areas of business, such as the alcohol misuse and such like, possibly. But again, this is why it's out for consultation at the moment, and I'm hoping that certainly off the back of today we can continue to drive those responses. And I'm sure that Paula will work with myself and others to see what the real needs and concerns are off the back of that.
Thank you. I'm very grateful. Appreciate it.
Okay. Councillor Golden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think it's important to put on record and my thanks to our council officers who've prepared the report for us tonight, and Essex Police and our council officers who have been working to keep our community safe during quite an unprecedented time. You know, a lot of those police officers were putting themselves right into the thick of it, exposing themselves to something deadly to protect us. So I think it's important to put on record my thanks. Before I get into my questions, I just want to put on record that I've just come off a stretch of nights, so I'm incredibly tired. So if I've missed something or if I've less coherent than usual, then please accept my apologies in advance. So just 3 points really, and I'll take them all in one because they're really quick. Firstly, I'm just interested to know the numbers around if we've had any successful national referral mechanism referrals in terms of human trafficking and exploitation. Secondly, I'd be interested to know in terms of domestic violence prevention notices, how many of those have been issued and how many applications for domestic violence prevention orders have been made, and maybe a bit of context around how they're being utilised. And finally, in terms, page 55, page 9 of the report, it notes that there's been 42 instances of child/adult protection. I'm just wondering if there was a breakdown in terms of how many of those were under 18, how many of those were over 18, and whether or not in any of those instances there was any additional factors, i.e. learning disability or autism or mental health. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Golden. Inspector Perry, Inspector Bradford.
I'm going to do a rubbish in these questions, I think. I'm going to have to promise to get back to you afterwards. So the NRM referrals, I can definitely get the information, but I haven't got it to hand tonight. And it's the same with DVPNs and DVPOs. What I do know is Essex Police is leading the way in terms of our use of those new pieces of legislation, but I haven't got the specific numbers in front of me for Basildon. I absolutely can get that. It's something that we are pushing really hard at the moment. So the earlier question around, you know, all those cases that we're not solving, that's exactly where we should be using domestic violence prevention notices, because we can at least give someone some time and space to think about the options they've got and to think about coming forward, perhaps after 28 days of respite from the abuse that they've been suffering. So more and more, historically, we've used them for the high risk cases, but we're pushing as much as we can now for those to be considered at all levels, including the standard risk, where we're saying, whilst there's no risk of serious harm, there is still a risk of this maybe happening again, albeit not serious. So we're trying to push for their use of those. So I'll take an action away if that's in order to come back to you with specific numbers around that. The last question, sorry, Councillor Gordon, I couldn't find the part you were referring to in the report.
Just in terms of it's mentioned in the report that there's been 42 instances of child/adult protection in relation to Operation Raptor. And I'm just interested to know maybe a bit more about those and whether or not we had cooperation from social care. And just going back to the point into the terms of the domestic violence prevention notices. I mean, perhaps speaking anecdotally, do you find that the magistrates are granting the actual orders? Is it difficult to get the orders in place, or as it tends to be your officers get them okay when they apply for them?
Yes, we do. So we have every force in the country took a different approach. We took the approach to invest in our legal team. So in some forces they send officers along to court, which is, it's not their primary function. Their primary function is to go to the incidents and deal with them. Going back numerous years, we would have gone to court a lot more than we do now. But so Essex invested in getting some extra officers, have some paralegals that go on a daily basis to court to apply for those orders for us. And I won't say they're all successful. It'd be wrong. The process would be wrong if they were, but we see a good volume of them coming back successfully. In relation to, thank you for the steer around the Raptor point. So our Raptor team are all day long, as you can probably appreciate, finding vulnerable people in the work that they do, be that adults or children. Their working relationship with social care is fantastic. And with the council. So their approach is obviously going, and their job is to investigate people operating in county lines, but they regularly come across children or adults who are vulnerable for whatever nature. We have a very strong response locally from partners, be it that we need some help around rehousing from the council. absolutely we always get positive support there, albeit that social care need to take some more responsibility longer term for supporting some people to find an alternative way out. I'm really positive about the response we receive locally in relation to that.
If I could just add as well, please, Chair, that sitting within the Operation Raptor team, we have got, as part of the previous growth, a dedicated safeguarding officer that works within the team. So it's a police constable that will go out and about in terms of when they're doing their warrants, and firsthand will pick up on any issues of vulnerability and any safeguarding that is required. So it was an area that we saw as a force that the investment was required, and that has been accomplished. And I would suggest looking at the referrals to very, very good effect thus far.
Lovely, thank you, Steve.
Can I just add as well? Sorry, that the council is working with Essex Police children and young persons officers around young people that go missing. So we've now got an officer that works and supports those young people that go missing.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Henry, then we will finally get to Mr. Wood.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to go on record as thanking the officers and our two police colleagues who are with us tonight. Excellent work as always, and a really, really great response to the many questions that have been levelled at you in the last 50 minutes. The one thing that I have noticed is that it looks like, and I think we've made this request before, but it looks like when we get these reports, it would be really helpful if we could have more of a figures breakdown, you know, on perhaps ward specifics, and then maybe some of the actual themes that are coming out of the work that's being done in the background. Certainly, I think it would have been useful for. It might have maybe caused more questions possibly, but it might have answered a few as well. So that's just a point for future for you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Mr. Wood, you have the floor. Mr. Wood, can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, I was talking to myself for a minute there. Quite enjoying it. Yeah, there's quite a few questions I've got, which I think some I can get answered away from the meeting to save time. But two things I would like. First of all, Paula, sorry. You talked about these meetings, Saturdays or evenings, etc. But I think in Vange, the area that I cover, you'll find that attendance is a very difficult thing. It's deprivation areas, single parent families, there's childcare issues, and also you can't get transport in the evening, and they can't afford taxis. There's no buses in the evenings, so there's no community halls in Vange. So it is a bit of a problem, and I wondered if you work with other groups such as churches and schools to, you know, get meeting places where you can talk to these people. And I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
So, hello. So as a result.
Yeah. Sorry, did you get all that?
Yeah.
Did you get all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, Paula.
Sorry if I didn't make myself clear on that. Those events would be virtual now. We would be moving to the virtual platform to deliver those training sessions. We wouldn't be, we'd be moving away from the traditional method of finding community halls and inviting parents.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah.
That. So it will, we will move to the virtual platform in that respect.
Okay. The main point I wanted to talk about really was domestic abuse, and it looks like that there's quite robust procedures for domestic abuse, which there should be. A lot's been talked about possible high-level domestic abuse, but there's low-level domestic abuse, which doesn't necessarily involve violence, and breakup of relationship, marriages, etc., because of this. And some of the things that I've had to deal with for residents has shown some holes in some of the procedures, and I just wanted to know how far along we are with perhaps training or whatever to make sure that the right questions are asked by the first port of call from the people that approach either the council or the hub, because some of the issues that I've dealt with are not even being referred to the hub. So my main concern is that people are not getting the correct information to get the right level of help, whether it's low level or whether it needs to be stepped up. And I just wondered what the views are that everything possible is being done.
Paula?
So, yeah, so the council offers safeguarding training. So when somebody starts at the council, they receive a safeguarding handbook, and that will raise awareness around all of the safeguarding, the abuse categories, including domestic abuse. Then all council officers undertake basic domestic abuse training, which is an e-learning platform. And then the officers, the frontline officers, will have enhanced domestic abuse training, and that would usually be classroom style. We are currently in the process of developing what that corporate domestic abuse training program looks like, because the classroom training currently is on hold just due to the COVID. We haven't been officers into that space, but we do direct officers to the South End Essex and Thurrock Domestic Abuse Board's website, where they have enhanced training, virtual training platforms on there for officers. We also do have the safeguarding officers available to support officers and to signpost into CEDA. So I don't know if it was CEDA that you are saying that officers are not, or members of the public are not being referred into CEDA. If you've got specific cases, I'll be happy to take that information.
Yeah, I've actually spoken to other officers regarding a specific thing, which I'm not going to bring up now because you use this general, but I just wanted it to be made aware that I think there needs to be more robust questioning at the first port of call to find out what the problem is and to make sure that the victim is given all the options that are available to them to make an informed decision as to the next step. And I think that's quite important. But for specifics, that is being dealt with, and I'm not going to bring that up now because I don't think that's right, because it's already been dealt with. But I just wanted that it's important that questions, the right questions are asked, and all information and all options are given at the earliest opportunity.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Being done.
Right.
Okay. Well, just bear with me. I'm looking through my notes. Yeah, you're talking about training, or sorry, talking to Year 9 pupils, etc., regarding prevention of, you know, getting themselves into trouble, etc. And I wondered if there was anything that was going to be done in primary schools, because a lot of the primary schools, I know the staff are actually getting prevent training through Juniper Education. And I wondered if the council were going to do anything on board with that at all for primary school.
So we deliver Crucial Crew,
yeah,
to Year 6s, and we deliver Walk Online to Year 5s in the primary schools.
And that's all primary schools in the borough, yeah?
Yeah, all primary schools are invited to attend or to take part in that. Where previously they would come and we would have a venue. Now that's all been delivered virtually.
Yeah, it's difficult because some of the questions that we ask, it is appreciated that because of COVID, things are very, very different to what they were. But, you know, just as long as everything possible can be done, that's what we ask for, really.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you, Paula, for answering the question. Are there any other questions for our colleagues from the police? Good. Right, I want to go to the recommendation, which is just a notice item. Duly noted, everybody? Fine. Now, Borough Commander Bradford and Inspector Barry, are you here for item 9 as well? Basildon side by side.
We absolutely can be, Chair, if that would help. But
okay, before I do that, I made one slip up, and I'm surprised no one's tugged me. I missed off item 4. That was to approve the subcommittee of the Housing Development Committee held on the 23rd of September.
Yeah, I was going to remind you later, Chairman.
Thank you, Sarah. Any comments on that agenda on previous meeting minutes? None? I shall
Only
read
my shocked that no one chastised you, Chair. I'm gobsmacked that you know, yeah.
We might have had a sneaky bet next time, Andre, which moment of the part of the meeting when I get tugged for it. Right. If all councillors can unmute themselves, and I'll call you out as you are on the agenda. Councillor Golden.
Yep, all good, happy.
In favour? Councillor Henry?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Schrader?
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub?
In favour.
And myself in favour. Thank you for that, Sarah. And apologies, member, if I omitted that, but I was very keen to get the police underway because they're very important. Yes, Councillor Rimmer.
Are we coming back to the work programme, or have you bypassed
The work
that?
programme I'll do last. The leader wants the work programme brought forward, but we can push that last.
Okay, no worries.
I think that works better. But thank you for raising that. Right, so we're going to skip a few things and go straight to item 9, Basildon side by side. And before I do that, I see John Mackay has logged on. He wasn't here at the start of the meeting. As the chairman of this committee, I've invited him. Are you the chair or the organiser, John, of the Helping Hands Food Bank? I know myself and Councillor Henry and Councillor Golden have a lot of involvement, and he's here at my bequest at subsequent meetings while we are dealing with the COVID-19 crisis and a subsequent recession, because we want to keep our finger on the pulse of how the food banks are getting through and people struggling with certain things. I don't want to make say any more because it might sound political. That's not the intention. So, good evening, John, and if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. You're welcome to have the floor. Anything I can't grant you is a vote. Right, now we shall go to item 9, Basildon side by side, pages 83 to 86. Denge, thank you for all your work on this. Please proceed.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is not going to be a very long one, but just to cover the report. So Basildon Side by Side is a social movement that was developed in response to an event we held on the 5th of June, which was listening to the Black, Asian and minority ethnic voices in Basildon. This was in response to what people will know as Black Lives Matters. So the event really sought to understand the experiences of Black, Asian, minority ethnic people in Basildon and bring about positive change. So the initiative is led by the community and supported by Basildon Council. And from that first initial meeting on the 5th of June, there were some key emerging themes. These have been grouped into 8 sections, which are listed there on leadership, education, social economic factors, health and well-being, community cohesion, policing and hate crime, working with young people, and engagement. So currently there is an overarching Basildon Side by Side group that meets on a monthly basis, and it's in the process of developing the action plan to its own individual action plans to deliver against these themes. So the Side by Side group is open to all members of the community, and indeed they are looking for allies to work with them. They're specifically keen to involve young people, and they are looking to launch themselves by the end of December. And at the moment, they're still in the process of trying to work on those action plans and activities, and the council will be in a better position to report this in the January meeting, or on the 23rd of January, once they finish scoping this out. So they met yesterday to look at the program and to put together a draft action plan, which is what they will be able to share more in detail, a little more in January. So there isn't any more from me from the side by side because they are in the initial stages of development.
Thank you, Dango. Before I invite members in, just want to make a little disclaimer. So I'm always an avid reader of the Electoral Commission, and they published on the 26th of October this year that someone's calling a political party Black Lives Matter. We're not having any dealings with a political party. It's the campaign group and its aims, not someone seeking to be on the ballot paper. So just want to put that bit of clarity in there in case someone very smartly reads the Electoral Commission, pulls us up as a council. Right, was that your hand, Councillor Yacoub, to speak? You have the floor. And Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dungay, for all the work that you've done on this. I had a look through it, and I think the headings and the 8 areas of focus are good. But for me personally, I felt like they were quite high level. There's so much that will come under things like leadership and education. It's so broad. And I know you said it's, you know, at an early stage right now, and they're still kind of forming everything. But I'd like to know if there's like definitions that could go along with that, and if there would be more kind of low level objectives that could be measured, because it's really good that we're doing this initiative, but for me personally, I really feel like it needs to achieve something that we can, that's tangible and that we can refer to and it's measurable. So yeah, I'd just like some more information on that, please.
Right. So as I mentioned earlier, it's only just yesterday where the chairs of each of the thematic groups got together. Some of them are ahead of each other, are ahead of the game. So if I can give you some examples, so the health and wellbeing group in particular, they've already sought funding to deliver an initiative across Basildon, which targets Black, Asian, minority, ethnic people, but more around COVID and the support, especially with this second wave. What they're looking at is education around the type of natural cultural foods, for example, that have high vitamin D, which can boost immunity. They're looking at an educational program. So one of the things they noticed was a lot of some of the community members, but this wouldn't be any different to a lot of people in Basildon, having got the equipment and the technology that's required for them to be able to access online information around health. So they're looking at providing that information, but also using a video project, which is going to be using local doctors that align with particular cultural groups. So for example, an Asian or Indian doctor who can come and talk about the specific foods and health and well-being from an Indian perspective, because they understand the culture, they understand the food. So these are some of the detail around which we will be able to report back on. So the health and well-being theme has already got 49,000 to deliver this. They're being supported by the CVS and being supported by Listening Post. So they are signposting the Black, Asian and minority ethnic people to mental health services through Listening Post. So there's a whole raft of work already going on. So I will be in a better position to give you detail, but there is quite a lot of work, unless you want me to cover a little bit more about some of the specifics, but I'm happy to bring back that detail.
No, thank you. That's quite good. I also wanted to ask if there was a structure in place in terms of like leadership and decision making.
Right, so for the leadership, there are 2 people who are leading that particular group, and they're going to be exploring the whole agenda around leadership. One of the questions that has come up is, how do people of Black, Asian, minority, ethnic make the right links to become leaders? What skills do they need? And who can they network with to get that additional support, whether it be mentoring, whether it's opportunities to volunteer to move them to a different level. So that conversation has already been taking place.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rimmer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to my fellow councillor, Councillor Yaqub, on this, because she's asked some of the questions I wanted to ask and given foundation for what I wanted to say, in effect, because I think we do need more structure around this. I do think we need better planning, and we need to have measurable targets on this, because I want us to be in a position where we actually have improvement in our community in terms of inclusion. I know it used the word integrate in the report. I think we've got to move beyond integration and make people feel very much part of their own community and the wider community and feel included, and that their voices are not silenced, and that they actually can feel a sense of belonging in all sort of environments that they wish to go for. I think there is a challenge for the council here. I mean, the project is labelled side by side, and I think that the council has to come up with some deliverables on this project as well. What it is actually planning to do to actually create leaders from the BAME community within the council in terms of a programme. How are we actually reaching out to schools and saying to people in the BAME community, to kids in the BAME community, you could come and work for us someday, and these are the sort of opportunities that we have. How are we doing in respect of mentoring? How are we doing in respect of our actual leadership programme? So I think we have to lead by example on some of this. We could also do more in terms of facilitating, I think, in terms of what other businesses could actually do in this level as well. So I think I understand what we're doing. I understand that we're trying to not be too top down with this, but you have a level of policy knowledge, Ndunge, and so does the council in terms of this, that can actually bring to the fore, and actually in terms of creating a structure and plans for them. And I think Councillor Yaqub, when she was talking about leadership, was also I got the impression she wasn't just talking about the work stream. I thought she was talking about maybe the governance process and who actually makes a decision about what's prioritised and what isn't, and understanding that as well. So there's one other point I'd like to make, and that's about a fellow Conservative, Yetunde Adeshile, and she's a brilliant community leader. But she felt she had to fight her way into this group. The other people in the group wanted her there, but I think there was a little bit of politicizing going on. Not from you. I'm not saying that, but I just want to make sure that we always know that if we can reach out to different political parties as well, then that's a good thing. So that no party has some sort of monopoly on any community and the issues that we're discussing today.
Right. Just to respond on the governance, there is a governance structure that's been put in place with a chair, vice chair, and then the thematic groups meet separately, but there is a governance structure in terms of how decisions are made. The chair and the vice chair get together, but there is a separate chairs meeting where they discuss everything before they come to the main meeting. So the governance structure is in place. It really is about the deliverables, and we are helping and trying very much to shape them, being conscious that they keep reminding us they are the community and they don't want it to appear as if the council are running the show. So we are allowing them to grow with additional support and facilitation. So yesterday we facilitated and supported the meeting of the chairs, and as they were speaking, we put together the action plan. So the council is helping them shape the agenda, but they're owning it.
Go on, Councillor Emma.
Thank you. And so, I mean, on the other point, I mean, that's great, but it's the sort of what can we do as deliverables? We can still say to them, there are things that you can ask of us as a council. And these are some suggestions of areas where you can ask that of us. And there are certain things that we're already coming to the table with, which we're prepared to actually take some action on. and that could be part of the programme. I also wanted to know, I got the impression just from the report, and I'm sure maybe that's not the impression I wanted to give, but the sort of BAME agenda has been diluted a little bit, because there's the vision versus which is talking about the whole community, whilst the mission is obviously talking about the BAME community. And I think there has to be a focus with all of these things to achieve something. You can be unashamedly trying to achieve more for the BAME community in Basildon, understanding that a lot of them have started from a position further back, and that they're going to have to do more to achieve what we would love them to achieve, and for everybody to feel included in our community.
Just to mention, they chose that vision, which was to create an inclusive Basildon Borough. It was their thinking, and when we discussed, or they discussed, what it is they meant, they were talking about if they could be on an equal playing field. So if they had equity, then they would be improving the borough as a whole. That was the communication, that's what they said. So they are very clear about working on the BAME issues and progressing that particular agenda, hence their vision their mission statement. They're very clear about that. So it's not been watered down, certainly. It still remains around the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and they're seeking allies from the wider population to join them in order to progress. And they believe in progressing together, they achieve equity. And that's probably, that's what they explained as to why they picked on the inclusive, being an inclusive Basildon Borough. And just to mention, I have taken the other key points with regards to the council to be discussed internally.
Thank you, Becca. Any other speakers? Sorry, Councillor Yuko. You have the floor, Councillor Yuko.
I just wanted to ask another question, actually. We recently did unconscious bias training, and in there, we spoke about, you know, the challenge of trying to change perceptions. And I'm just wondering, because I know, Dunga, you mentioned that the council does want to do work on this. Would this be a part of this project? Would it be separate? Could it possibly come under the education heading? Because I really think that's an important thing that we should go ahead with. And I think it would make a really big difference, especially in terms of people from a BAME background feeling included and feeling comfortable in the borough. Yeah.
So what Councillor Yacob is referring to is a piece of work we're doing under the Inclusion Diversity Strategy, which is around tackling myths and correcting misinformation, which is what we're looking at how we do that, especially out in the community. And earlier on, Inspector Perry mentioned hate speech working group. Some of this work we can put as our council, the council's response to this initiative side by side, and look at how the community might consider joining us in tackling the myths and correcting the misinformation. So we can put it to them as this is the council's actions or activities, and would you like to join us in actually addressing these?
Councillor Rimmer, very quick point, please.
No, I'll try, Chair. It's just that extremely passionate about this subject. In respect of that last point, your answer to Councillor Yacob's question, I'm just wondering if we can go beyond that as well, because one thing that has come out of a lot of the discussion about race that's been coming about this year is actually the microaggressions that people are actually having to suffer on a daily basis, where you've got, I mean, I went to one amazing talk by a black woman who was in a top form accountancy firm, who's still followed around a shop by detectives as if she potentially is a shoplifter. She still has people knocking on her door asking to speak to the owner of the house, and it's those, and she's in cosmopolitan London and getting those issues. So I think we just have to have that on our radar as well when we're tackling those issues and trying to re-educate people.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rimmer. I'm one of those people who has got people peeking from across the aisles when I'm shopping, so I know of that experience. And so in terms of those microaggressions and addressing those, absolutely. And I had a carpet person come round the other day, I wouldn't mention which carpet company, and they asked me for the homeowner. So that's typical experience. So yes, definitely.
Thank you, and I'm sorry you still have to go through this today.
Thank you. Are there any other members wishing to speak? Does the police wish to make any contribution to this item, please?
Yes, Steve, if I may, I just think it's really important at the moment. We had a really tragic incident, in America that has, I think, promoted and driven a lot of activity worldwide. I know I myself sat there on the original Black Lives Matter discussion. It was some time ago, wasn't it, Dungate? And we listened to some very, very humbling stories and some difficulties that I think the collective around it was a virtual room even back then. We all had to sort of have I think we had a big think about, where we sat and some of our own views and what we perhaps took for granted. But the positive off the back of that was the fact that clearly everybody was wanting to do something about it. So we've got some momentum going now, and I would suggest that that this is the time to push it forward. So absolutely, projects like Side by Side and the hate speech working groups and such like is something we'll wholly commit to, and hopefully we'll be able to and move this all in a much more positive direction.
Can I just add?
Oh, sorry.
Can I add, Chair? The police have been really supportive on the Side by Side policing a hate crime group, which is actually led by Yetunde. There's been some positive work, and they are working with Vernal Scott, who is the diverse inclusion lead for Essex County Council, and James Swatton as well. And the IOPC are actually looking to join that group and look at some of the issues that come up around policing. But we do recognise that there could be a conflict of interest, but that group is starting to be quite well represented.
Lovely. Right, I shall wrap up on this item as there's no other speakers. I say this rather nicely because Councillor Rimmer was making an agreeable point. And I think we're in a lucky position compared to other boroughs because we have Councillor David Burton-Sampson as our Mayor, first ever BAME Mayor of this borough. And during the situation we've had over the summer months, when he turns up online or goes to venues in these difficult times, he's wearing his chain because council in this borough put the party politics to one side and support our Mayor. And I think that helps, obviously, BAME members of the community see that we have a member of the BAME community as I'm the first citizen of the borough, and I think that's quite a good thing. It's really good. I'm pleased I voted for him. I'd like to thank Dengay and the team who picked up, because what really got this going locally was that dreadful letter sent to that lady in Frienswald. That was dreadful. The language in there. That was something from another era, probably when we was outside of it before we even joined the EU. That's how that sort of language was commonly spoken, not these days, not in this century. And also the police for dealing with that. Public sector workers, whatever their background, shouldn't be getting vicious, abusive letters, let alone the tone and the language. So I'd like to commend the police and the council staff for helping that resident, and no one should get vicious, nasty letters, whatever their background are. So I shall go to the recommendations. Sarah, it says that we acknowledge. Do we take a vote on that?
Yes, I think you should actually, yeah.
Okay. So if all councillors can unmute themselves, please, and I'll read you out in order as you are on the agenda. Councillor Golden?
Yep, favour.
Councillor Henry?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Schrader?
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub,
In favour.
and I'm in favour. So that's 6 in favour, and that is unanimous. Right, so we will go to Together for Safer Communities update, pages 59 to 63. This is a nice short one, Paula. Paula?
Yeah, sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. So this report is to provide an update to members on the Together for Safer Communities initiative. Delivery of public meetings and road shows has been significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been suspended since March 2020 in line with government restrictions. Prior to lockdown, meetings took place in a number of wards and were once again supported by Essex Police, who provided an overview of crime and antisocial behaviour, and Neighbourhood Watch, who encouraged members of the public to become actively involved in their local area. Crime prevention materials were purchased to be made available at the meetings and at community engagement events, aiming to start a conversation with local residents and shoppers about community safety issues, encouraging them to take crime prevention measures to protect themselves and their local communities. Due to the restrictions, we've not been able to deliver with the meetings and the road shows. We have now got a significant amount of crime prevention materials available. So it has been proposed that £10,000 of the remaining Together for Safer Communities budget be donated to 6 local food banks across the borough, each of them receiving £1,670 to support them in these current times. If members choose this option, there will be £500 remaining in the budget, but we equally still have a significant amount of crime prevention materials available for members if they wish to distribute them to members of the public. So the committee is being asked to note the report and acknowledge the impact of COVID on the Together for Safer Communities initiative, and to approve the proposal to donate £10,000 of the remaining budget to local food banks to support the response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Paula. And again, thank you for writing this report so quickly. There's really not much left of this year once the winter's over and possibly restrictions on the lockdown and COVID-19 ease. So we could leave that money sitting in the bank till the next financial year, or my view is, and members, you decide as you see fit, that we review the 3 options on page 61 and give the £10,020 to the borough's various food banks, which are listed on page 61. I will go to ward member councillors first, and then tenants, leaseholders, and Mr. McIvy so wishes. Councillor Henry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for bringing this to the committee. I think this is an absolutely sensible thing to do in the circumstances that we find ourselves in, and I would like to go on record while we have Mr. John Mackay in the room with us, as being incredibly grateful for the work that he has done, not just during this pandemic, but all the way for many years for this borough, and especially with the Helping Hands food bank that operates out of my division. I really do think that this is the right thing to be doing. I'm absolutely on board for option 1, and I would remind all of the recipients of this and others that there are still plenty of avenues of support through our colleagues at Essex County Council as well. And you know, I'm quite sure yourself and myself, Mr. Chairman, will be happy to put people in contact with whoever they need to get that facilitated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, while I've got you on the floor as such, obviously being fellow county members, which is why I brought up in the declarations, because I knew this was likely to come up, is county allocating as well another 167,000?
I believe there's an amount. I believe there is an amount. I'll get you the exact thing and send it to you so you can circulate it to the rest of the panel. But there are other avenues of support coming down steady streams all the time.
And can I ask, will it be like a food bank will have to bid, or will it be just given fairly shared out about amongst recognised food banks?
For accuracy, I think it would be better to get some facts with that rather than just a chinwag about it. No question.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Any other members wishing to speak on this item? Mr. Wood. And then I'll get Councillor Rimmer. He was a bit slow there.
Yeah, just want to say I think it's money that's very well spent, especially in this current situation where movement is curtailed somewhat. And it would be nice to just have some feedback from these food banks to see how many extra people may have benefited from what the council has given them. It'd be nice to see how many people benefit with the extra money that they've been given.
Okay. Well, we've got John Mackay to give us feedback. Yes, that's a fair point. Councillor Rimmer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to do this based on the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I welcome the fact that there's a food bank in Pitsea that has actually been chosen as one of the recipients as well. It's a question possibly for John, and apologies, it's one that lacks the knowledge on this. It is just to understand there was a question raised about face mask poverty, possibly, and I'm just wondering if they stock face masks and give those out for free as well. If they don't, might be something for us to look at.
Councillor Rimmer, before we go to John Mackay, I have a naughty brain. You've given me an idea. Sarah, I'd like to propose an amendment. We have £500 still outstanding. If you listen to what Councillor Rimmer said, you can guess what I'm going to put forward to the committee. That we use the remaining £500 of the Together for Safer Communities budget to buy this face masks, be it disposable or cloth. We can have the discussion what we think's better. At least with disposable, they go straight in the bin. If you haven't got a washing machine and a cloth one, it's a bit awkward, but that's nickety-pickety. That we use the remaining £500 from Together for Safer Communities, buy a batch of face masks and give them to the food banks. And I think Councillor Rimmer wanted to second that, as I ripped off his idea.
You can, yeah, fair enough.
Right, Sarah. Do we have a valid motion to put amendment to put to the committee?
Yeah, you don't even have it as an amendment. You can just have it as an additional, a third recommendation. That's fine. And if members are happy, you can vote on the 3.
Well, can we take that vote now, just so we don't get confused? Because Councillor, this is the administration's policy, and I want to keep it cross-party. And Councillor Rimmer seconding it. He's not a part of the administration. Then that way it's cross-party, yeah? Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, vote on it now if you want. Yeah.
Okay, so, and let's get my maths right, because I keep forgetting about the £20. It's £480. If we can get it wrong as a council on £20, we're going to be in real trouble when it comes to the main budget. Right, so
I thought the chairman was going to donate 20.
Well, if one donates 20, I think we all can, eh? Anyhow, so the amendment is that the remaining and unspent £480 from the budget for Together for Safer Communities is to purchase a job lot of face masks to be distributed amongst the food banks listed on page 61 by our officers. Those in favour. So can everyone unmute? Please tell me how you're voting. I shall go to Councillor Golden first.
I'll vote in favour of that.
Yep. Councillor Henry.
Favour.
Councillor Rimmer.
Favour.
Yep. Councillor Schrader.
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
And I shall be voting in favour. So that was proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Rimmer. Yeah, okay. Right, so we've dealt with that very good point Councillor Rimmer made about the face mask, and we've resolved that straight away on a cross-party basis. Are there any other speakers before I call Mr. John Mackay? Nope. John, can you hear me? John Mackay? I can see his icon. No? Well, John, if you want to pipe up any time, please do so.
John
Can you hear
Mackay's
me?
on mute. Ah, he's there now.
John?
Can you
I
hear
can
me?
hear you.
Right. Can't see me though, because I can't see myself. Can you hear
Go
me?
on, John. You've heard the debate. What's your thoughts? What would you like to say?
Right. As you well know, our food bank started in 2012. We started exactly the same time as the Trestle Trust. I didn't want to pay the exorbitant price of joining the Trestle Trust, so we set up with £500 given to us from the cleaning company. I can't remember the bloody name now. Yeah. Anyway, last year
was that Veolia, John?
Eh?
Was that Veolia?
No, Pinnacle. That's the one.
Sorry.
And we started for then, and we spent the last 8 years sourcing food. We buy now off a fair share, and even though someone's gave me loads of money, we still have to buy the food. That works out about £2,000 a year. Last year we did 7,503 meals. This year up to March we did 2,069. Now from March up until today we've done 31,724 meals. So I mean that's £1,600. I'll take it, but I wish there was a naught on the end of it, because the money that we managed to acquire this year from Essex County Council, the Community Fund, and the £2,000 from the council has long since disappeared, because we still have to buy stuff with the amount of people that are coming through the door. You know, we have to buy milk, butter, sugar, all them sorts of things, because we don't get, I mean, people will go and donate stuff, but normally it's beans, pasta, and cereals. You just can't give, and we give now full 7 days of meals. So you'll get your normal meals, plus the fact you'll get chilled, you get veg, and at the moment we're giving frozen food, whether it be frozen meals or frozen pre-cooked chicken. So people out of us are doing fairly well. One point I wish to make is at the beginning of COVID, there was this thing called Community Hub. Now, while that was running, we only received 89 referrals. I was actually working on my own because all my staff was isolating, and for the first 5 months, it was me on my own, picking up food, packing parcels, delivering it, and eventually in the end, we had to call it a halt because people were literally taking the mickey. And it just like you get your money, go and spend it, and then get a food parcel. So now all our referrals for our food parcel comes through all the different agencies, whether it be Citizens Advice, Job Centre, Triangle, Peabody, EPEP. There's a whole range of people that send us clients for it, and it's manic. It's absolutely manic. You know, we don't want no volunteers because we're a tight-knit group. There's me, my wife, my 2 daughters, and my niece, and a friend of ours. We're COVID secure, but it's hard work. And we really are struggling for money because everything costs. It's just as plain and simple as that. And Christmas is coming up, and we're looking forward to giving these people, as well as getting their food, we're going to give them a Christmas dinner. So we've already managed to acquire chickens, and we're acquiring all the bits and pieces like the fruit, the veg, the afters, some sweets, some bits for the kids. The WI donated a load of stuff. And so, you know, we're hoping to get through Christmas. After Christmas, it might be a bit of a struggle because there isn't a lot sitting in the bank. And that's basically it, really.
Thank you, John. Just stay where you are, because I think members will want to ask you a question because you're on the front line, so to speak. How are you fixed for items like tampons, toothpaste, soap, the basic things for people keeping clean?
Yeah, we get a fair supply of them. I mean, we have to go and buy washing powder, disinfectants, all the cleaning materials. We get a steady supply of women's products, so to speak. We're more than able to that. Nappies, baby food, wipes, all that sort of stuff. When we run out, obviously you can't say to someone, "Oh, we're sorry, we ain't got none." So we try to keep a small stock, and sometimes you go and buy it, and next thing you know, you'll get a load in. You know, masks. Earlier on in the year, there was a company, and they were throwing them at you. You know, gloves, masks. You know, and we go through bucket loads. You know, I don't know. It's hard to explain what we actually use every day of the week. You know, sometimes we've got loads of beans. We run out of soup, and all of a sudden soup's coming in. Now the winter's coming in, people are donating soup. You know, but it's hard. It's hard. It's literally a war out there. I'm fighting people. I'm fighting supermarkets for food. There's always others. These supermarkets that pop up. You know, they pop up. Oh yeah, we get loads of money. Give them loads of money. They pop up, and then they disappear because they've got no money. And all those people are coming to us. My phone. I've turned my phone off tonight because while I sit here tonight, I've got, I don't know if you can see it, I've got all these. These are orders for tomorrow. There's 7 orders already for tomorrow, and we ain't even got through the day yet. So my phone and my computer will be on all night, and this stuff will be coming in all night. It's constant. It's 7 days a week. I collect 7 days a week. I haven't had a day off since September.
Thanks, John. Now, a bit like a radio disc jockey, because I can only hear your voice, not see you.
Yeah.
If someone watching this on YouTube wants to support your food bank, how would you best plug it? If someone wanted to help you, what would you really need at the minute?
Money.
Apart from money, what goods?
Cleaning products. Cleaning products. You know, household products. Washing powder. Soap powder. You know, soaps, toothpaste, toothbrushes. Everything. Just work it out. When you get up in the morning, I always say to people, you get up in the morning, what's the first thing you do? You have a toilet roll. You brush your teeth. Use soap. Use a towel. You go down and have your breakfast. So you've got cereal, milk, sugar. You might have a cup of tea. So you've got a cup of tea, you've got milk, tea bags, coffee, whatever you want. And then go through the day. You might want a cup of soup. During the day, you might want a meal. You know, we don't get things like eggs. We have someone, we do someone a favour and they buy us eggs, or we buy eggs. You know, eggs is a thing we don't get a lot of, but we get by. We get by, you know. And anybody who comes to the food bank might think, oh, they've got loads of stuff because that's out the front. We get stacks of bread. We get more bread than what we could use, so we put it out the front. So the people that want to take a loaf away, they want to take a baguette away. And we make all our parcels up during the day. And what's left that we know we can't keep, or we know that like tomorrow night I'm going to go back to Tesco's in the afternoon, I'm going to get a delivery from FareShare, which will all be sorted out for Thursday. We put it out the front, and then local people can come along, take whatever they need. And that's because we've got 5 fridges and 5 freezers. My big chest freezer at the moment is full of pre-cooked chicken. I won't tell you where it comes from, but it's a local firm that does chicken, and it's full.
Lovely. Thanks, John. Any other members want to ask John a question, please? Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, John, thank you. I mean, I feel for you, and as you say, you're sort of in the front line fighting the battles here, and all credit to you and what you and your wife are doing. I was just wondering, obviously with those restrictions that have been in place, and obviously what that's meant for restaurant trade, have you had any contacts from them in terms of helping out the food bank as well?
We did have McDonald's first of all when COVID first started, but that all disappeared. We get stuff off of FareShare, which is, I mean, I had 100 kilos of chicken. I mean, I've never seen chicken breasts so big. They were like turkeys. So all that had to be debagged, and we vacuum packed it all, and it's all in the freezer. It's all gone, because then we say to someone, when you got 2 breasts of chicken, or you got spatchcock chicken, or you got a load of thighs, you got a load of legs, you got a load of wings, whatever you want, and they got a meal. So you give someone a spatchcock chicken who's on the road, they can eat that for the rest of the week, because it's all pre-cooked. and the other stuff as it comes in. We sometimes get luxury things like steak. They don't stay in the fridge very often, very long. That's gone. And the first people come in, they get the steak. I mean, tomorrow I've got a list coming in, and we get things like potatoes, satsumas, cheese, pork pies, mozzarella, roast, fridge freezers, roast chicken, and salted butter. You never know what you're going to get, but we have to buy that every week off of a fair share.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, John. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rimmer.
Just one final thought, really. It was just, you mentioned milk being a particular problem. I'm just wondering if you've switched to powdered milk in terms of that, just for storage and people using that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't like powdered milk. Some minorities, they like powdered milk, so we always keep some by just in case. But milk is so cheap. We can go and buy milk at Farm Foods for 15 pence, or you can go and buy it in your local supermarket for 50 pence. And when we get money coming in, and people do come to the door and say, look, there's a tenner, there's 20 quid. Well, that goes in the milk kitty or the butter kitty, and then we go and get it. It's as simple as that. It's just constant turnover of stuff that we have to have every week. But at the moment, we have, we've got some, it's cheaper to buy a cow, I think, and have it out of the back, and I can milk it every day.
Thank you, John. Well, that reminds me of that line from the film Smokey and the Bandit, when the dopey sheriff's son goes, what happens if we eat one of the cows? He gets to become an hamburger quicker than the others. So don't be doing that, otherwise there'll be a lot of people eating steak. Right, well, you managed to plug Farm Foods. So Farm Foods, you've had a free advertising slot. Please support all of the local free banks with some free milk. Right, thank you for that, John. Is there any other speakers? Because we still have a bit of work to do. Lovely. Before we finish on this point and start going to several votes, Leslie, are you there? Leslie? 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 Unmute yourself. Can you do me a favour, Leslie? You've heard what John Mackay has said, speaking on behalf of one of the food banks. We've got, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 food banks right dotted across the borough. Could you speak to the marketing and communication department of the council? You've heard what John said, what food banks are sweating on, and just put that out as a tweet or on the council's Facebook page as well. Please support your local food bank and pick up these items, particularly eggs, and drop it in the supermarket.
Don't drop it in there because they get smashed.
Oh,
absolutely.
Gently place it on top.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So you're going to get that tweet and that Facebook malarkey out. Lovely jubbly. Right. We shall go to... Right. Hold on. Sarah, talk us through the vote, because we've got 2 recommendations on pages 59 and 60, and then we've got the 3 options on page 61. So talk us through how we're going to vote on this one, please.
Yeah, I mean, the options are just set out for members to consider how they could go, the options that they have in front of them. But all you need to do is to ask the members to vote on that on the 2 recommendations, unless members want to put forward another motion to support one of the other options. As members haven't, I presume they're happy to go along with voting on the recommendations.
Councillor Rimmer, you're unmuted. Did you want to speak?
No, I was just unmuting, ready for the vote.
Good man. I'll tell you what I shall do. If members turn to page 61, and we're voting the 3 options, so it's crystal clear for officers, and then we'll go to the recommendations 1 and 2 for this agenda item. So if everybody, all councillors can unmute themselves, and you just say 1, 2 or 3, please, for the options. Councillor Golden. 1, 2 or 3. Councillor Golden. Councillor Golden. While he's well away. Councillor Henry, 1, 2 or 3 option.
Option 1, please.
Councillor Rimmer. 1, 2 or 3?
The recommended option 1.
Councillor Schrader?
Option 1 for me, please, Chairman.
Councillor Yacoub?
I'd go with the recommended option 1.
So that's option 1. Thank you. Councillor Golden, 1, 2 or 3?
Apologies for technical difficulties. I support option 1.
You wasn't plugged into that Dominion voting machine.
Let's not go there, Kerry. Sorry, Chairman. Let's not go there, Chairman.
Well, I had to try at some point tonight, and I shall be for option 1. So it's crystal clear for officers that the committee supports the recommended option number 1. We're going to do both votes together on the recommendations on pages 59 and 60. So I shall read out members' names. Please indicate how you will be voting. Councillor Golden?
Yep, favour.
Councillor Henry?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Schrader?
Favour.
Councillor Yacoub?
In favour.
And I shall be voting in favour. So that's 6 unanimous votes. Thank you. Right, let's get this back in order. Dengue, you have item 8, Inclusive Basildon Borough Project, harnessing the economic power of the Purple Pound.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. I'll just start by asking the committee to note that this report was written prior to the current lockdown and prior to the potential availability of the various vaccines, which is Moderna, Pfizer and Oxford AstraZeneca. I will cover all the elements of the report, but bring James Wheeler from Perito in to cover the town centre regeneration work, the accreditation scheme and NEAT box. So this report provides an update on the Inclusive Basildon Borough project, which has come to the end.
Sorry, Dengue, I'm very rude. I've just let Leslie notify me that we're okay, that we've got 2 representatives of the police, and Leslie O'Shea's asked me if they can go now. You're very welcome to stay, but if you have police business to do. What was that, Paula? Oh, you're waving. Okay. Thank you, Chief Inspector Bradford and Inspector Perry. You're very welcome to stay through this meeting. Oh, and Carol. Any officer that needs to go, you can go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your
Thank you. Good night, people. Thank you.
I hope you didn't mind interruption, Dengue, but, you know, they might get the calls, blues and all that.
No problem. So just to recap, this report provides an update on the Inclusive Basildon Borough project, which has come to the end of its first phase. It also outlines a proposed approach for embedding inclusive and universal design into the town centre regeneration. So in terms of recommendations, we're asking committee to note the progress of the Inclusive Basildon Borough projects to date, and also note the proposals for phase 2, which is about embedding the inclusive design into town centre regeneration. So moving on, the project started on the 20th of January and it's come to the end of its development and test phase. This is where we were doing quite a lot of research and looking at how we can put various products into place and frameworks. So this particular phase sought to understand what was required in terms of remediation to make Basildon Town Centre an inclusive and purple-friendly environment, as well as what needed to be done with regards to an inclusive framework, which would be embedded into the town centre master plan. So the report lists out various stakeholders that we engaged with since the 20th of January, and I won't read them out specifically, but they cover community groups, schools, street surveys, council employees, disability groups, partners, businesses, among others. So we wrote to 16 businesses in the borough, and the intention at the start of this was to introduce them to the initiative as a way of planting the seed so that they could join this particular project in the future. But also our intention was to come back to them at a later date to find out if they could support the high street in terms of their corporate social responsibility. So we were looking for them to invest into a grant pot that would help to support the smaller high street retailers with paying for remediation where any access issues had been identified. This conversation did not take place due to COVID because we are slightly behind. But generally, when we did write to the businesses to introduce them to the initiative, the feedback was that they required more information once the project had been better bedded. And as mentioned earlier, unfortunately, due to COVID, we have had to move this work into phase 2 of the project. At this stage, it's also difficult to establish which businesses will remain in the high street. Obviously, there is a second lockdown, which moves the focus of the project to the town centre regeneration. That's where we feel we can make a huge impact as we wait for the high streets to recover, and we don't know what shape that will be in. So moving on to the launching of the product. We formally launched the product on the 28th of August, which was an event outside the Basildon Town Centre. And the aim was to communicate the Inclusive Basildon Borough Initiative to both businesses and consumers so that they were aware that it existed and in preparation for the work in phase 2. With regards to developing design principles, this has taken place. So draft principles were put together and shared with planning policy. The intention is to include that in these draft design principles once they're agreed in the supplementary planning document to make sure that whenever we are looking at developing, we are considering these principles. So in addition, we had discussions with Sempre Homes around how to ensure inclusive design when they're developing or designing the homes. James will now take over from here and cover the remaining part of the report.
Hi everyone, so I will be brief. So we're looking at Inclusive Basildon Boroughs looking to collaborate with the regeneration strategy, the developers charter, developers guidance notes. These are the key themes which are around climate change, sustainability, access and movement. IBB is also looking to work with the on-site use centres and Highways England as well. And just skipping through, there's a couple of points here about interesting points that are worth raising. The first one is really showing that the importance of IBB are the accessible homes consultations that are going on at the moment. There's a DWP green paper that's coming out shortly, which includes national strategy for disabled people, and that's going to be huge. Justin Tomlinson commented it's vital for new developments are future-proofed, and Vicky Foxcroft, who is the shadow minister, has said that we're all behind on wheelchair accessible housing. And I know there's also going to be more of a focus on supporting the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this is something MPs are highlighting. So IBB is very much at the forefront of consultations, policy and changes that are going to be happening over the next couple of years. And in summary, so this work offers us a glimpse of what the future will be like, practical, inclusive and focused on putting the human being at the centre of the built environment. IBB is able to support this by assisting with the development of design principles which can be introduced and updated over the short, medium and long term according to the needs of the built environment programmes. Brief recap of Neatbox. A few people would have heard this before, but Neatbox is an app and phone-based. And essentially what it is, it's a customer service device that enables people to book their visits to businesses in town. And as soon as they enter the geofence of 300 metres from the business, the company organisation are alerted that this person's on their way. And there are essentially plans afoot for rolling that out within Basildon Town Centre. The accreditation scheme is really focused on getting people to join accredited level, which was always intended to be the minimum platform for businesses and organisations that either couldn't directly engage with the scheme or weren't simply for other reasons not able to do so. But due to the COVID situation, it is considered advisable to focus on committed and use that as a launch pad for everybody else to move up through the various certifications. And I think that's probably everything that's going to summary there. And Dungays, have I missed anything, or is that complete?
It's worth mentioning changing places, the regulations around that in Homes England as well.
Yes, certainly. So the changing places are essentially a brand of, sorry, there is now a cat who has decided to appear in behind the scenes. Okay. Essentially, it's a brand of fully accessible WC. And good, it's gone. That's still there. And essentially, with changing places, they're going to be everywhere that people to need. There's an idea of if you've got to go, you've got to go, and having the facility to move and assist someone of large adult body is really, really important. So changing places is the future, and everybody needs to be able to go to the toilet. In terms of Homes England, I think we were referring really to the fundamentals of the regulations. So I'll be really, really non-technical on this. So what's essentially happening is there's a focus on building accessibility into the mandatory baseline policy from Part M. And what's quite exciting about this is that that will be rolled out ideally standard, and ideally being the first category 1 section of that approved DocM as well. I think that's probably everything.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Dengay. And thanks for your work on that. Members who wish to speak on this item first? Councillor Rimmer, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for their work on this. I did have a couple of questions. One was this neat box, and I noticed obviously you've come to a conclusion with them, and actually they've offered £698 for 2 businesses. For me, that doesn't feel bold enough in terms of being part of a suite of policies to actually harness the economic factors of the Purple Pound. I'm just thinking, can we be bolder on this? What sort of due diligence did we actually do to select the box over others based on, obviously now we have quite a small offering of what's being put forward in terms of the potential impact and how many people that could potentially help. I also wanted to know, I mean, obviously we've got 15 businesses that were contacted pre-COVID who didn't answer in the positive. They answered in the we need to know more. And I'm just thinking perhaps we needed to do more of that hard work beforehand before approaching them, to come to them with a proposition and maybe more off-the-shelf solutions for businesses, because obviously a lot of the business managers are actually very time poor. So they may be things that they would like to implement, but if you actually have off-the-shelf ideas that they could utilize, then they may be able to implement them. I think I know we are a disability confident employer ourselves as a council, and I just wanted to know what sort of traction we have done in terms of against our own individual targets on this issue. And on the housing point that was raised, I know I've got a number of residents who are frustrated about not getting the right housing for themselves, who do have disabilities, and just feel that some of the adaptations that have been made because of the nature of the property they have are inadequate. So I just want to know what's our ambition in that, to make sure we don't have residents that are actually left behind.
Thank you, Dengay.
Okay, Neatbox, I'll start with Neatbox. And we did explore, we actually brought our digital expert to meet with Neatbox and have a conversation. So as to understand what the product was, whether we could create our own, was it more cost effective, and also was there anything else out there similar to Neatbox? And the conclusion was there isn't anything that's similar to Neatbox out there. and it is a total cost of about 4,100 for 10 businesses. But they felt, again, whilst we're having the conversation, some of it was post-COVID, pre-COVID, and the more later one was within the COVID era. We did recognise that a lot of the businesses on the high street, and James did actually walk onto the high street and make contact with some of the high street businesses, some of which were not really at this stage keen on doing anything. Mallards, I think, were the only ones who were forthcoming. And the second one was actually not a business, it was an organisation, which is Motivated Minds. So because of that, we ended up with 2 for a trial. We haven't got enough funds at this particular moment to do the 4,100 trial. So that's something we can look to see if we can establish some future funding for that. But then again, we don't know how many of the people on the high street will, the businesses on the high streets will survive. The other thing was about independence. It was a lot easier to engage the independents and get buy-in than it was the chains, because there's headquarters and there's a whole bigger issue around who will buy into the product. So that proved to be a challenge, because for local, if you take Asda, for example, they had to ask head office, and there was quite a chain, and we're looking for people to do a quick trial for a period of 12 months so that we could get feedback on whether this product actually works before we invest in it fully. We wanted to understand its usage as well, how many people actually use it, and how have they found it. So to invest in 10 businesses, we also felt was a little bit too much when we didn't really understand if the product would work for our town centres. The other one around the businesses and approaching these 15 businesses in advance, I do agree with you. We needed to develop that further before going to them. So I take that point. And with regards to what we're doing internally, from 2007 onwards, we've been doing a lot of internal work around engaging with our workforce to understand some of the inclusion diversity concerns, some of the positives as well as the concerns. And what we found is they talked about the need for more managers to understand reasonable adjustments. So that's something that's featuring in our current inclusion and diversity strategy, and something we're going to be exploring. And we know managers are doing it. It's just a case of where we might need to tweak a few things. So we are doing work. We've also looked at, and it's, again, this was pre-COVID, some of the things that came out from both community and workforce were issues relating to making our facilities more autism and dementia friendly. So we were looking at how we, the Basildon Town Centre, the Basildon Centre can become more autism friendly, how we could make the whole entire building purple friendly, so take into account dementia. But beyond that, we were also going to work with some of the shops, the retailers, to look at things like the sunflower lanyards. We noticed Argos, for example, had them at the time, but when we spoke to the people behind the sales tills, they were saying they didn't actually know what they were for. So it's good to have them, but they didn't actually use them in the right manner. So we knew we had to do quite a bit of remediation around that. With regards to housing, I don't know if I can pass that on to Leslie to just pick up that point.
Thanks, Dungo. Yeah, Councillor Miss, so obviously we have got a number of work streams, and if you're talking specifically about social housing, we have got the AIDS and adaptations work stream. If that's, I'm not quite sure, obviously it's a specific case that you are talking about, which obviously I can pick up with you offline, but there is a budget there to make those adaptations to people's homes, to allow them to remain in their home and to make life more comfortable for them. So it's a bit difficult without going into specifics to...
Oh, sorry, it was where the home is beyond adapting, where it proves that adaptations can't work, unfortunately.
So we have, Yeah, if it's beyond adapting, we have got some specific homes for people in wheelchairs and various other disabilities. We also had a budget last year and next year, which is around extending people's current homes. So whereby perhaps the home is currently not big enough to take a specific adaptation, whatever that might be. We have got a budget in place now that was approved last year through the budget for doing extensions to homes, and that's been very, very successful in allowing people with quite severe disabilities to remain in their home.
I mean, it would be good if I could have a specific offline conversation about one case with you.
Of course, yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Denge and James, again, for another update. As you know, I'm very interested in this and very supportive of the work that you've done already. I've met with you, I think, a couple of times, or 3 times at least already on this. The one thing I would say is it's no surprise to me at all that you're going to have more support or at least more direct response from those independent retailers, because they're making the decisions for themselves. They know what's in the pot, they know what's in the kitty and what they can do. It is a shame that we've got so many really large businesses in the town that do rely on corporate office making decisions for them. But I think maybe my suggestion would be, as somebody that works for a large corporation, don't give up and just go to head office, take the time to do it. I think the accreditation scheme is absolutely fantastic. I'd really love to see it as a retailer, somebody that's had several businesses in Basildon Town Centre. You are isolated and alone as an individual retailer, and there's very little, no matter what structure people may think there is in the town for you to communicate with other retailers. It simply doesn't exist to the point of actually being able to make collective decisions and have a collective retail ambition for your town. So I think this is incredible work. I'm very supportive of it. I really am, and I think to the point of adaptations to houses, it would be fantastic if we got ourselves to a point where houses were infinitely more adjustable and adaptable and actually, frankly, more suitable for everybody without needing to make such huge adaptations at such a cost. You're at that sort of tipping point where you've got the buildings you've got, and people's lives or circumstances or health or age is changing radically. They need to make adaptations to make it more livable there. We need to at some point start to think about how do we do that more easily. How do we build that in to begin with? So I think for my part, I'm really, really always happy to support this. I'm grateful to the work that you've done and also for including me in some of the input in the early days a year ago. COVID has knocked pretty much everybody for 6 and put everything back. So it's no shame on anybody that we are where we are with certain projects. So best of luck with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Any other members wish to speak? That looks like a no. Hold on, Andrew. No. Right. Any other speakers? Right. Oh, Councillor Rimmer.
I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, that you've got this on your radar, but I'm just wondering, as part of this, are we also are we paying a special attention to veterans as well?
Well, what this project is focused on is what they call the so-called purple pen. Anyone with any disability, seen or unseen. And if any veteran has any seen or unseen disability, this will, of course, pick up on this. But obviously, it's a big project. I don't believe any town has done what we're seeking to do. And as you go along, you will pick up things such as veterans. PTSD, for example, is the light outside shops going to trigger veterans' PTSD? I don't know, is the honest answer. So this is a path. COVID-19 has been a bit of a kick in the goalies, but we're getting there bit by bit. Right, I've got a question for Denge and James, because I've tabled a motion at Council about these neat boxes with regards to traffic light controls, because around Basildon Town Centre, Essex County Council's got this brilliant idea. If you've got vision problems or any vision disability, they've taken off the noise feature when you press the button to cross the road. And they're hoping the car that stops isn't an electric car because you won't be able to hear or see them. So what's the progress been, what's the latest progress with regards to upgrading the traffic light crossings around the town centre? What feedback have we had from Essex Highways?
Right, there was a cost implication. What what the chair is referring to is something called Button, which is a device that's attached or embedded in a traffic light, and it responds to your mobile phone device. So as you approach the traffic light, it presses the button for you and stops the traffic, which means you can cross safely. It is very useful for people with visual impairments and those with mobility issues who may struggle to cross the road. There is a cost of approximately £900 per traffic light. And my recollection was that Essex Highways said they needed to look at the product to see if it works with their within their guidelines or their procurement guidelines. One of the things is the cost to us would be £900, but Essex Highways would apply their own costs for having to install all of these into the traffic lights. So they would have to tell us the total cost. But if I recall, County did say that they didn't think the product would align with what they do, and they were going to look into this. And my understanding is they didn't approve of the product. They weren't keen that it had only been trialled in Scotland mainly, although we now have some of it been trialled in England. So Peterborough has got some of these button devices in their traffic lights, but Essex County Council haven't appeared to be keen.
Okay, because I think while we're seeing the town be redeveloped, it's an opportunity to mug developers to fund this scheme, so the taxpayer's not out of pocket. So, for example, Sempra is looking at redeveloping Car Park 14 with, I shouldn't say the Chapelgate project because that's all secretive, but you'll find out in a few weeks. But we don't keep secrets as an administration. But anyhow, but there will be properties built on Car Park 14 by Sempra. So there is a good opportunity that Sempra pays to upgrade those crossings across the Nethermain with this button app from Neat, and the taxpayer doesn't get hit for it. It's such a good idea while those opportunities arise. So carry on pushing with that, Dengie and Jones. It's very important we have that app because more and more people are getting electric cars. And if someone drives an electric car and decides to jump the light and you think it's safe to cross, there could be an unavoidable accident. So we've got to keep pushing on that. And I have a motion at County at next month's meeting. So as there's no other speakers, I shall go to the recommendations on page 65. If all members can unmute themselves, and I'll call you as I've done previously. Councillor Golden?
Yep, I'm in favour of the recommendation.
Councillor Henry?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Schrader?
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub?
In favour.
And I am also in favour. We're just going to have a quick 5 minutes. So if people wish to spend a penny, get a glass of water, feel free to do so. James and Dengo, of course, you're very welcome to hang about. And thank you for all your hard work on this. Because I think members will want a bit of liquid refreshment or spend a penny because we're going to be talking about the finances around this committee. So it's 9:24. So if you all stay as you are, just switch your video, whatever off, and we'll see each other just before 9:30. Okay? So a 5-minute adjournment. Thank you. Sarah, I think if any member is listening and they've got their camera and mic off, if you can come back into the meeting, please, because it's 9:29. Everyone's had their 5 minutes just to powder their nose and get a cup of tea.
I'm going to start the record again, Chairman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Henry, Councillor Coob, Councillor Golden, Councillor Schrader, if you can just switch your mic on, and of course, attendance and leaseholder reps, please.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm here.
You look like you're ready for bed.
As I said, these night shifts absolutely kill me. It's, yeah.
Oh, Councillor Henry, Councillor Coob. Right, I'm nearly there. Councillor Coob, Councillor Schrader, are you there? London Calling. It's getting like the Eurovision Song Contest here.
Kerry, you mentioned a banned word.
I know. But they
You've
said
got a
one
whole
earlier.
meeting without mentioning it.
I'm curious to know about Councillor Gordon's night shifts and what work he's doing, just out of his well-being and welfare, of course.
I work in a hospital, so yeah, it's been very, very busy, as you can imagine.
Just
No,
for,
of course. Well,
just for
good
members
for
to
you.
know, we are still on YouTube. I've started the other recording, but YouTube doesn't stop, so we are actually still recording on YouTube.
As long as we
No,
don't
that's-
mention US election fraud, the video will be safe.
And also, our lovely
Are you
resident
backing
Seymour
Giuliani on
human
that, are
side.
you, Councillor Smith?
Oh, that Sydney lady, she seems to be spot on. It's entertaining, whether it's true or not.
So we're not going to mention that then, are we?
No, don't mention Zivor. Right, Councillor Schrader, Councillor Coob, you've got to save me. Come on.
Yes, please do.
Right, we've got Andrew, he's got his cup of tea.
Back in the
Miriam.
room.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Miriam. Hello. Andrew, could you give Miriam a little gentle nudge electronically, please? Who's that on your cup, Andrew, while we're waiting for Councillor Coob? Who's it?
I was wondering if you would notice that. It is, in fact, me.
Now we'll all
I
want one
literally
of
just
those.
said to Rosie, I said, for
for a laugh and a giggle, I'm going to put my drink in one of my. This is actually, believe it or not, the Shrader for Wesley Heights commemorative mugs I had made for my campaign team as a joke.
From
and
here,
I've got two of them left.
From here, that picture looks more like Del Boy.
Lovely, jubbly.
My mug shot from my leaflets.
Oh, I won't say nothing. That might be construed as salt and wounds. Right, we've got all members of the committee here, Sarah. We're good to go. Lovely. So we shall go to the draft service budget general fund from 2021 to 22 to 24 to 25, including review of fees and charges, pages 87 to 110. Do we have Owen doing this, Sarah? Who's our money person?
No, Andrew Wilkes is going to. Andrew Wilkes is going to introduce this one.
All right. Hello. All right. Who's going to? Right. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just to introduce myself, my name's Andrew Wilkes. I'm a management accountant. I'll just give you a brief overview of the contents of the report, and then we'll just open it up to any queries. So this report provides information on the draft general fund budgets relevant to this committee for the financial year 21-22 and the financial forecast through to 24-25. These have all been set in accordance with the budget setting process and budget guidelines for 21-22 as approved by Policy and Resources back on the 22nd of July. The draft budget at enclosure number 2 is on pages 95 to 99 of the agenda and is the product of that process and guidelines. And an extract from the capital programme showing the projects relevant to this committee is included at enclosure number 4, which is on page 115. It is worth noting that the budget has been prepared on the basis of business as usual. Therefore, should the pandemic continue and affect the council's financial position next year, obviously that will be identified and managed at that point in time. The committee is asked to endorse the revenue and capital proposals for inclusion in the overall budget that will then be presented to Policy and Resources on the 28th of January. Included at enclosure number 5 on pages 117 and 118 is a summary of financial performance to quarter 2, which was September 2020. The schedule of fees and charges applicable to the services covered by this committee is enclosure number 3, which is at pages 101 to 114. These have been set in accordance with the fees and charges strategy approved as part of that budget setting guidelines, and the committee is asked to approve these charges. At Policy and Resources Committee in January, the strategy for managing the future overall financial position of the authority will be considered. In addition, I'll just take the opportunity to say that we are holding a series of briefings to assist members in their understanding of some of the more technical aspects of the overall budget, covering such things as treasury management and housing revenue account that we had this week, as well as reserves and other such stuff. So colleagues from relevant services are present. So Leslie is present, and collectively we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. We'll come to you, Mr. Wood, but members have first pickings. Any member wish to speak? That's good. Mr. Wood, you have the floor, please. It's all right, take time. Mr. Wood, we can't hear you.
Sorry, forgot me button. Yeah, on page 97, there's third-party payments. I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit on that for us.
Yep, I believe, and I will double check whilst you are asking. They are payments for bed and breakfast suppliers. They're generally bed and breakfast payments that we pay within the housing option service.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Right, I see there's no other speakers, so I'm going to put this straight to the... Oh, Councillor River, just caught me in time.
Yeah, apologies. I saw in one of the documents attached to this. Apologies if I'm getting it disconnected because I didn't receive my paper copy. I've been using electronic, but was a forecast based on the increase in council tax. Is that of 1.99%? Is that baked in?
So what we're presenting tonight is obviously just the service budgets relevant to this committee. So anything to do with council tax and whatever will just be considered with the overall budget when that goes to policy and resources. So that's not reflected or considered at this point within the services themselves.
Fair enough. I'm just, obviously, you know, there have been promises made about council tax freezes. I'm surprised that that's not presented as a business as usual. So it's just an explanation on that, really.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, that was a promise we kept this year, and I'm sure a lot of people benefited from it. Councillor Henry, you have the floor.
Sorry, there's no answer to that. I would just wanted to know why the working assumption was a 1.99% increase.
Well, I was on the working assumption Trump would win, and I was wrong. So working assumptions are a fine thing until you get the facts. The officers still have a lot of work to do. The council still owed a bit of money with COVID-19. If Mr. Jenrick is a man of his word, then we can start talking about freezes in council tax. But until the Treasury keeps their word, it's hard for us to actually put a proper option in front. Now, I've got Councillor Henry.
So at the moment, you're suspecting a 2% increase is what you're aiming for at the moment, Councillor Smith.
What I'm saying is, I ain't Mystic Meg. If I was Mystic Meg, I'd have the winning lottery numbers be somewhere up and sunny on Zoom. So you can't make bricks without straws. That is what I'm trying to say, Councillor Rimmer, and I hope that's clarified that point. Councillor Henry and Councillor Golden.
Thank you, Chairman. There's some mention here of our community facilities, and in particular George Hurd and the place get a mention. There's very little scope for any talking points here on the Langdon Centre. Is there, what plans are there? What budgetary plans are there in place for the Langdon Community Centre? Thank you.
Jack?
I'll take that one.
Anyway, you've been hiding, Richard.
I've been here all the time.
Fair enough. Good luck. Carry on. Sorry.
The budget for the Langdon Community Centre remains in place. Clearly, the operation of the Langdon Community Centre will have to change, given that the community association has unfortunately had to hand the keys back. And it may be that some additional budget provision will have to be put into the budget. That will be considered as part of the budget that goes to Policy and Resources Committee in January. My understanding is that there will also be a report going to Neighbourhood and Public Spaces Committee in January, which is going to be looking at the Council's provision of community centres across the piece.
Councillor Henry, do you want to come back?
No, that'll do. We'll pick it up in January. Thank you.
And I just want to put it out as well, because I've been looking into it, because I think anyone who represents areas near that benefit from the Langdon Community Centre is once the COVID restrictions lift on ventilation of buildings, then that building will be back open. The question is, who will manage it? The council has every intention of reopening the building, but how it looks, this will be for neighbourhoods and public spaces and possibly policy and resources. But I think everybody on this committee and across the chamber of the full council would support the Langdon Community Centre being back open to the public. Councillor Golden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question, just a brief comment, just to thank the finance team, the heads of services for pulling this together. It's not an easy task, and I'm sure maybe one thing we can agree on when this budget comes forward, all of us, 42 councillors, is 2020 has been an unprecedented year. And I think that's something we can all agree on quite easily. Obviously, the detail we'll disagree on, I'm sure, at some stage, but the broad principle, this is an unprecedented year. We can't predict where the land will lie in the next 6 months, next 12 months.
even if a vaccine does become available, it's going to be a couple of years before that becomes effective. There's economic repercussions for the lockdowns that we've got to deal with. Our high streets are going to change. So there's phenomenal uncertainties that we're dealing with. It's going to be an incredibly challenging year to be in finance and accounting in local government space. So I think, as you said, Chairman, if we had a crystal ball, it would be great, but we don't, and it's going to be a difficult year, and that would be true for any administration, for any councillor up and down the country are going to be struggling at the moment. So yeah, I just felt it was important to acknowledge that, and also thank officers for pulling this together in what is an extremely unprecedented set of circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Well, before I put it to the vote, I'm Mr. Half Glass Up, or full, I should say. I think this vaccine that's being touted will be rolled out. We've got a company called Pfizer. If you do your history, those relied on to get the antibiotics together. That first penicillin jabs, there'd be enough penicillin for all the troops in D-Day, and they've done it. So we've got Pfizer and the vaccine and many other great companies. So I think once the vulnerable people start getting the vaccine and other people who could be slightly susceptible, hopefully our community centres and over 50 clubs will be fully functioning, because they're in a terrible place and there's nothing anyone could do. We could whinge at government, there's nothing they could do. The vaccine's nearly here, so a bit of hope. And then the new year, where we all getting called out, why is that bit of paint missing off the wall? Can you get some new chairs? The usual things we get pulled by community centres for, and I'm looking forward to getting tugged because they're getting well used again. So, right, I shall go to the recommendations on page 87 and 88. Are you happy to have all three recommendations taken as one vote? I assume that's a yes. Members, can you please unmute yourself and I'll call you out alphabetically. Councillor Gordon, how will you be voting on all three items?
I'll support. Yep, in favour.
In favour. Councillor Henry?
Abstain.
Councillor Rimmer?
Abstain.
Councillor Schrader?
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Yacoub?
In favour.
And I shall be voting in favour. So using a casting vote, there are 3 votes in
Oh, you don't need
favour.
that.
Councillor Rimmer, carry on like that. We'll be calling you Councillor Dads too.
I'm just pointing out the Constitution. Sorry.
Okay, well, there's people watching it, and I try and make it crystal clear for people viewing, because we all read the Constitution, but the viewing public will want to see how the vote's gone. So using my
Every
casting
letter,
vote,
Kerry, every letter.
there you go. There's 3 votes in favour and there's 3 votes abstained. So all 3 items pass. Okay. So second but last item, because there's 3 more items, including this one. Item 11, draft housing revenue account, pages 119 to 139. As Richard's popped on, you're going to give us some good news that we've been paying down the HRA debt, and we've got a plan to sort that out in this coming financial year.
Okay, there's a challenge. So I'm introducing the HRA budget report, which covers the same period as the general fund budget report that Andy introduced. It followed the same guidelines as Andy referred to that were agreed by the Policy and Resources Committee on the 22nd of July. Again, it's important to note that the budget has been prepared on the basis of business as usual. Should the pandemic continue to affect the HRA's financial position in 21-22, we'll have to manage that when we get there. The draft capital programme is presented at enclosure number 4. Just to make the point that that includes the money for extensions that Leslie referred to earlier. And it also includes the budget for aids and adaptations that, again, Leslie referred to earlier. And I'd just also like to point out that in terms of provision for private sector housing, The general fund budget contains a budget for a provision of disabled facilities grants, and that's in the private sector housing budget, which was in the previous report, and that's £1 million next year and for each of the next few years. Included in enclosure number 6 is a summary of financial performance to date in 2021. Just some key points that I've picked out of the report. The report includes a brief note of the impact of the pandemic on the HRA's financial position. I think it's fair to say that there has been an impact on the HRA, particularly in terms of rent and service charge collection, how that plays out in terms of debts that ultimately become uncollectible will only become clear over the next 12 to 18 months. The brunt of the impact has actually been felt by the general fund, and there was a short section in the general fund report which set that out. The figures in enclosure number 6 on the summary of financial performance to date also show the impact of the pandemic on delivery of the capital programme and on delivery of the new build and acquisition programme. The report assumes that there will be a rent increase of 1.5% from 1st of April 2021. That is the rent increase that, as per the guidance issued by the regulator, the guidance actually says it's the Consumer Prices Index at the end of September in the year before the rent increase is applicable, plus 1%. CPI at the end of September was 0.5%, so that equates to a 1.5% increase at the moment. That's the assumed increase. There's currently no change to the funding available for the new build and acquisition programme. We're currently considering what can be done to supplement the new build and acquisition programme, and proposals will go to the Housing Development Subcommittee on the 9th of December. It is usual that we would present to this committee in the autumn for approval all of the service charges that we charge to tenants and residents of sheltered housing schemes. However, I decided not to put the sheltered heating charges and the block lighting charges to this committee because I was unhappy with what the figures were revealing. They were suggesting both would increase, and in the time that we had to prepare the service charges, I wasn't satisfied that those increases in costs were real and were apparent and could be justified. So I erred on the side of caution and decided not to put them to you tonight. We will put them to you at your meeting. I think it's the 15th of January. That still fits in with the budget timetable, but I thought you need as members need to be comfortable that the figures are correct before I ask you to approve anything, and before you have to be held accountable to the people that we're going to be charging these service charges to. The key message is that on current assumptions, the HRA is sustainable over both the short and long term. And I will finish with a plug for the rather excellent series of technical briefings that are being made available. They're pretty much every Monday between now and Christmas. The first one was last night, and coincidentally, that was on the HRA. It gave some technical background to the HRA budget, and as Andy said, there are others coming up on reserves, treasury management, commercial, etc., and I'd highly recommend them to you if you're able to attend. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, well, as if lead on the opposition side, Councillor Rimmer.
I'm just asking questions, but thank you, Chair. I was just going to really make the point that our group pretty much was voted against any increases to the rent on this, and obviously we'd find it very difficult to support any rent increases going forward, especially at this very difficult time in terms of what everybody's actually facing. I'm also obviously a little concerned about whether we've actually found enough efficiencies in terms of service charges as well, and in terms of whether the actual residents are getting enough bang for their buck in terms of what's actually being delivered. I've had several complaints in the past about cleaning being missed, so I'm not entirely convinced by that either. We also had quite bold plans for what we would like to do in respect to the HRA and in terms of investing in our estates, and essentially that is obviously missing from this as well, because this administration lacks the ambition of our group that clearly wants to better Basildon and the whole of Basildon, and actually is fed up of them forgetting Pitsea and sidelining it, fed up with them forgetting Langdon and Langdon Hills and sidelining them. They've become just the group for Basildon Town Centre and building loads of flats there because they're the nice white elephant projects the socialists like. So on that basis, I really can't approve this.
Respectfully, in my most dulcet television tone, I shall say that was a party election broadcast on behalf of the Conservative Party, with tongue firmly placed in cheek. May I remind Councillor Rimmer, in fact, I don't need to remind Councillor Rimmer, Leslie, this estate improvement programme we launched with the 2020-2021 improvement project. Leslie, can you tell us which estates we've done already this financial year? Leslie?
Yes, I can tell you what we've done. We're currently working in the Gilgrove area, and the programme is put together based upon looking at the assets, and obviously there's a programme of investment, so I can absolutely assure Councillor Rimmer that Pitsea gets its fair share of that investment. We'll be looking at Felmores very shortly. That's coming up on the agenda for environmental improvements. Just to pick up on your point about the cleaning and value for money. So all of those service charges and cleaning in particular, those contracts are procured to make sure that we get absolutely great value for money for our tenants, and customer satisfaction is around about 99%. So I'd be very surprised if anyone could have the evidence that that's not providing good value for money. So if you want to send through to me whatever it is you've got, Councillor Rimmer, I'll happily have a look at that.
One moment, Councillor Rimmer, you've made a series of points, you was heard and you were listened to, and I'd just like to go through them. The cleaning contract with Pinnacle was put forward when you had the council for a year, and that was passed. So if there's any problems with that cleaning contract, we'll happily pull them up. But the contract was agreed when Councillor Don Morris was in the Housing Committee Chair. So we will make good a contract. You mentioned the Langdon Hills estate in the HRA budget, which you and your colleagues voted against, and it's just being installed now. It's £20,000 worth of HRA lighting on the walkways. If you go around there at night, it's not very bright. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't look safe. They've concluded the surveys. They're about to sign off on the works, and it's going to have brilliant white light LED to keep that estate looking safe. I know your colleagues put something forward, but under the rules of the HRA, it was highway works, and the people who bought their property would be given £3,387 of their hard-earned money to Ringway Jacobs, and they're very nice shareholders. I think you had another point about particular estates. In this forthcoming HRA budget, we'll be putting forward what you'll be voting on tonight will be more estates getting a deep clean and work on. We've put in a HRA Pride team this week. It's been around the Valence Way area, starting at Delmores, working north. clearing the weeds, the vegetation, stuff Essex Highway should be dealing with. They're doing a fantastic job. And if you'd like them in any of your estate council room or any other members, you feel it's not looking tidy or unkempt, you contact me, contact Leslie, we'll keep rear ends and we'll have your ward looking as it should do. You had a further point, Councillor Rimmer, and then I will go to Councillor Henry.
Yeah, I think I was talking about the overall package of services that they were receiving, and I'm sorry, I am surprised at 99% satisfaction rate. I respect the fact that you are defending the service. I respect the fact that there was a contract awarded under our administration, but that doesn't mean it doesn't get reviewed. Just, you know, it's not a transactional decision, it's a relationship. I have had people come to me saying that cleaning has been missed, and I think I did raise those and they did get sorted, but I'm just saying that it's not perfect. And I just think we need to look in the round about what people are actually receiving and see if people are actually getting value for money. In terms of the estates, £20,000 is a drop in the ocean, Kerry. I appreciate that it makes some sort of impact, but we were talking about much bigger figures to actually make the estate more in terms of the built environment and tidying that up itself, because there's parts of it that are crumbling. Obviously, there's the heating issue in the Langdon Hills estate as well, and that truly does need to be fixed. We're now navigating our way to another winter that's going to be really bad for certain people that are not actually getting the heating on the hot water that they actually deserve to have on a continuous basis. And it's been featured in the local media, as you well know, and I'm sure the council's had more complaints that they admitted to at the time, and in particular in the Rokescroft estate in Pitsea, and if I go into the Rydeen estate in my ward as well, and then if then there is areas that actually are crumbling and actually need to be looked to have something done to them. I've walked around my own estate with our officers and with my fellow councillor, Councillor Mackenzie, and we were looking at the issues and we were talking about millions of pounds to actually fix these. But at some point this has to be done. I mean, that's the point. A lot of this housing was built on London clay. I appreciate that, and it takes time to actually settle. But then that work at some point actually needs to be done and programmed in. And we had an ambition to do that. I'm not seeing that ambition from you guys. And this becomes a problem because you've got an extra year here without having an elected mandate because of the circumstances of COVID. But we can't pause on these issues. But it's our residents that are suffering.
I would make the Sarky comment, but you made some points about areas in your own ward, so I won't be making a Sarky comment back, because if you feel in your ward, and it applies to any member, you're not getting the housing services you think your constituents deserve, you email me and Leslie in the same email and we will get that sorted. Second best is not accepted by this administration. The heating system, the officer working on the project has left the organisation. We could have carried on with his work. Now that the government is outlawing gas and fossil fuelled forms of heating by the end of the decade as a part of your green malarkey, what's the point of putting something in that the leaseholders will, and tenants, sorry, the people who bought their property, will pay through their nose for, and then by the end of this decade, will have to be ripped out and have air source pump heating, which the residents after the trial didn't want. So officers are now working on it, looking at what the government is coming forward, so then we can say to the residents, this is the long-term solution, so they only have to pay once. You mentioned that there's been a resident, according to the newspaper, the Echo, that has been without heat and hot water. I spoke to that journalist. I said, do you have the name and address of the person? He went, I got it from a political source. The Residents Association there saw the article in the paper and they put it on Facebook saying, can the person please come forward so that we can get the council to sort the heat and hot water? I spoke to Leslie. I think the tenant's name of that property was called Mary Celeste. No one's found them. They don't exist. And I say this in all sincerity. If any tenant or leaseholder is given a third-rate, substandard service, you tug me and Leslie, and we will get this sorted, because people work hard, they pay their rent, and they're going to get the best service. And we'll get it done. It's been tough with COVID, I admit that. There's been some repairs that could have been done during the early lockdown, but it's been unable to achieve. As soon as the lockdown was lifted, we got into the properties. It's been difficult. We've caught up, and we're getting there. And Councillor Rimmer has now unmuted himself, so I guess you have one more point to make before I go to Councillor Henry.
I would say I can contact somebody to make sure that that person is put in touch with the services, but they are a genuine person, and I believe the journalist did actually verify the source, regardless of where it came from.
Right, well, if you find me this person, I will get this sorted. Leslie, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest that when Morgan Sindall do their presentation on the 2nd of December, as part of that, I ask them to present the works that have been undertaken this year and the forward plan for investment in our stock. So you have a comprehensive presentation on exactly what we're doing in the borough. Would that be helpful?
That would be very helpful. And before I go to Councillor Emery, I forgot one thing. Councillor Emery mentioned crumbling walls. They all belong to Essex County Council. And as soon as I see one, I report them. But, and I could be critical, it takes time for them to be done. You just don't get a couple of our part-time brickies in, fresh bit of sand and cement. Has to be a proper job. It's a pain and an inconvenience for residents, but I understand why Essex Highways take their time to get those repairs done. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't support anything that increases rents. I can't. We've made a position clear on that. And to be fair, you don't need the votes anyway. You don't need a support on it. What I wanted to do was pick up on Leslie's point about the 99% or whatever the percentage was of the cleaning contract and the satisfaction rates. What would be the avenue of that information being collated? How is that? Have we arrived at that satisfaction rate, and what would be the appropriate avenue of then challenging that back? Because where I live, you know, literally on the edge of the 5 Links estate, I've got flats, you know, along the side. I've got, you know, shared spaces. It's those shared spaces that are the issue. We're not talking like the street scene where the sweeping courtyards and sweeping pavements. We're talking the shared spaces, staircases, very similar to where Councillor Rimmer lives. Similar to the Langdon Hills estate, similar to where the chairman lives. Those estates with those little shared hallways, shared areas. It's those places there in particular that are hanging, that people are complaining about.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Henry. Did you say internal flat blocks? Sorry, you cut out a little bit.
Well, sorry. Yeah, I'm talking about shared spaces. So, you know, lobbies. You've got certain blocks of flats where Councillor Smith lives, where Councillor Rimmer lives, the Langdon Hills estate, the 5 Links estate, where there are communal spaces, blocks of open-air blocks of flats, or open-air entranceways and things like that. And then again, also some of these ones with the security doors as well. The shared spaces that people have no choice but to use in order to get into their home. So it's those are the things that I'm getting the complaints the most about in terms of cleanliness of estates. And I find it really hard to work out how we've arrived at a 99% satisfaction rate and how people have fed into that. I see some neighbours have literally challenged the cleaners direct, and therefore theirs is getting done, whilst others have been a little bit quieter and not, created a fuss, and theirs isn't. So what would be the avenue of approach for residents? We can't all just email you.
So in our general needs flat blocks, it's through a customer survey, and in our shelter scheme, which is a large part of that cleaning contract, they also have we still got Elsie on the call? Because she could talk about how that have we lost Elsie? So it's exactly the same through the sheltered housing. Not only do the residents give their views through survey, but the staff go and inspect what Pinnacle have done as well. And I'm being completely honest here, I'm not aware of any major issues. We've literally, so we manage the contract through a strategic core group that I attend with Carol and the directors of Pinnacle, and there is a weekly operational group as well, and nothing has been escalated up as being an issue. They are very, very responsive, Pinnacle, is what I would say. So if I was to raise something with them, they would absolutely respond to that. So if you've got some areas that you want to have specific attention that are an issue, please let me know, because they haven't reached me. They honestly haven't. And I'll make sure we give that a special attention.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Amy. Richard, are you there?
Yes.
What percentage of our tenants does the government pay housing benefit on?
It's about 60.
60%.
Is that still right, Leslie?
Between 60 and 65, I think, something.
Between 60 and 65, yeah.
So the real winner, if we went for a vote rent freeze or possibly a rent cut, would it be Her Majesty's Treasury? Richard?
I wouldn't use the word winner, but yes.
Right, okay, I just wanted to clarify that. So is there any other speakers before I wrap up on this item, please? Councillor Golden? Councillor Yacoub? Councillor Rimmer, one moment, just ask me. Councillor Schrader? No? Mr Wood, as a tenant? Did you want to speak? Councillor Rimmer, we'll come to you. You've had plenty of speaking.
Briefly, I mean, part of the conversation touched briefly on estate improvements, and through the Tenants Leaseholders panel, we have been told that there is estate improvement budgets, but obviously during the COVID, that has all gone to pot. But what I'd like to see is a programme of works, which areas are being done when, so that if people are asking us, when will our area be done, because it's all being done over Langdon or it's all being done over Pitsea, at least people asking me in Vange, I can tell them it'll be done in whatever time it's going to be done. If we know it's going to be done and when it's going to be done, at least we've got something we can actually tell people, and that would be a great help. Thank you.
What I'll do, Mr Wood, when we go to put the renting notification of the annual rent charges and changes, I'll make sure we put that down as part of what you might call the spiel. Right, as there's no other speakers and Councillor Rimmer's really eager to come back again, you have the floor, Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the point we are concerned about, obviously, is those people who are not receiving support payments for their rent, but they have to pay that social rent out of their own hard budgets, and obviously they're going to suffer with this increase, and they might be the just about managing. And during this time with COVID, with the pressures that people have had to suffer, I think hitting the just about managing and trying to put their head underwater seems to be irresponsible of this council.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Well, for the last, oh, sorry, Councillor Yacoub, go on. Councillor Yacoub?
I'd just like to say, I don't know where this compassion was when the Tories had overturned the policy that we put in place to have a reduction of council tax for people with disability. And that's something that we will be putting in place again. But I don't understand why you mentioned just about managing. But when you were in administration, you didn't act, you actually overturned something that was so important to people who really needed it.
Thank you, Councillor Yacoub. Councillor Rimmer, I have been kind, and you've had more than your fair share.
We've been asked a question, though. That was all. That was
a political point put as a question. You've had party political points. Councillor Yacoub said a point. Everyone's had their point. Now,
I'm quite happy to answer Councillor Yacoub's question here or offline.
Councillor Rimmer, I joked earlier when you said you might end up being Councillor Dads too. I think I shouldn't have said those words. I got a serious question though for Mr. Larkman. For HRA debt, could you talk us through that? Because when the government brought in the rent freeze some time ago, that railroaded our repayment policy. We was going to have that all wrapped up in 30 years, that historic debt of what it was at the time, 230 million. And when members flick over to somewhere in the agenda, it says it's 205.5 million. So in recent years, the HRA debt's gone down a bit. But can you talk us through your new 30-year repayment plan?
Yep, I can do that. So this time last year, we were looking at reducing the HRA debt by 2050-51. I'm not sure who might still be here then, but somebody can test whether my numbers were right or not. We were looking at reducing it to somewhere in the region of £20 million. This year, over the 30 years, it's looking at, it will only reduce to somewhere in the region of £44 million. The reason that residual debt has risen this year is because the rent increase assumption that we used for the forecast last year was, it was still consumer prices index plus 1%, but we'd assumed that consumer prices index would be 2%. Therefore, we had, and the reason we'd assumed 2% is because that's the Bank of England's target for CPI. So we'd assumed there would be a 3% rent increase. So in the absence of taking any other action, that £30 million effectively just gets added onto the debt at the end of the period. Just to anticipate what may be Councillor Smith's next question, if we then froze rents, that would cost over the life of the 30 years, that would cost approximately a further £30 million. So we'd probably be looking at outstanding debt at the end of, assuming we took no other action. Sorry, I say you took no other action, then we'd be looking at outstanding debt of around about 60 or 70 million, assuming we didn't change any other element of the plans. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Did any other member wish to ask about the HRA debt? No, right. I shall wrap up, and I'm sure everyone's happy for the recommendations to be taken as one vote. Everyone happy as that is one vote on page 120? Okay, so we've got a choice here tonight, members. We've just heard about the importance of tackling the HRA debt. If this was money borrowed to build housing stock, we have something to show. This is old historic debt that's been kicking around, and it's costing the poorer people in the borough money in interest and outstanding loans. And where does that interest go? It doesn't stay in Basildon. It doesn't help Basildon people. Square Mile, and it goes through the various money markets, doesn't help the local people. And we are asking people on a 2-bedroom property who are presently paying £90.35 a week to pay an extra £1.36 a week, and their rent will be £91.71.
How much is that in
the
milk and
lowest,
eggs?
Councillor Rimmer, you was heard in peace and quiet, and I'll be heard in peace and quiet. So we are asking people on the lowest income to pay £91.71 a week for a 2-bed property. 60 to 65% of those households, their rent is paid for by the government. So this modest rent increase of 1.5% will tackle the debt. It will take £30 million off that debt at the end of its lifetime.
Regressive.
We are, Councillor Rimmer, respectfully, you was heard, and all members will be heard. We may politely disagree after each member's spoken, but we will be politely heard. We have an estate project going around this financial year, 5 individual states, and that will be repeated again. We have a HRA Pride team. If a member feels their wall looks unloved, needs a tidy up, we will go out and we will clean it. And I would urge all members, if you think your estate's looking a bit untidy in your ward, you contact me and we'll get this sorted. We'll get it booked in. That's what the HRA Pride team is. Our tenants pay their rent and they deserve to live in respectable, tidy estates. I take on the point about Pinnacle, but I would say to members, if there is a complaint about Pinnacle, you need to take that up with me and Leslie. Because if a service provider is not up to scratch, you've got to let us know. And we'll kick rear ends to get it right. But overall, this is good for our residents. And for the sake of £1.36 a week extra, ask people who are privately renting, and I privately rent, I wouldn't mind a £1.36 a week price increase. I think it'd be a lot more than that when my landlord reviews his rent. So members need to bear that in mind. So I shall now go for all 4 recommendations on page 120. Everybody can unmute themselves, please. And I'll call out each member, and if you can indicate how you are voting on this. Councillor Gordon.
I'll be supporting the recommendations.
Councillor Henry.
Abstain.
Councillor Rimmer.
The Just About Managing, against.
Against. Councillor Schrader.
Against.
Councillor Yakub.
In favour.
And I should be voting in favour. So there's 3 in favour, 2 against, 1 abstention. Thank you, members. And then we've got 2 other items to deal with. Thank you to the financial team. If you wish to hang around, you are very welcome. Or if you'd like to make a quick cup of tea and 2 a toast and watch Newsnight, you are very welcome to that as well. Next item, the COVID-19 impact assessment. Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to make this very brief this evening, as 2 major service areas have or will be covered next week in more detail. So you've heard from Paula and the police in terms of community safety this evening, and we've got repairs next week. So majority of services are operating normally and staff are still predominantly working from home wherever possible. And as I said last time, risk assessments have been undertaken and we've got safe systems of work in place for all our staff. So very briefly, in terms of rough sleeping, which I know members are very interested in, we've currently got 6 rough sleepers on the street, 9 rough sleepers accommodated in hotels, and we've actually moved successfully 38 rough sleepers to settled accommodation since March, and that's all credit to the team. That's been some achievement, and they've worked tirelessly to make that happen. So that's a really positive thing for us. In terms of housing management, sheltered housing, all the communal areas with the exception of laundry rooms were closed on the 17th of October when we moved into tier 2, and obviously remain closed under the national restrictions. And we've reverted back to how we were at the beginning of lockdown. So staff are undertaking health and safety visits and they're keeping regular contact with residents through daily phone calls, and all the normal safeguards are in place there. I suppose one area that it's worth noting is around the rental, and I think last time I reported that the rents were remaining fairly stable, but we have started, as to be expected, to see an increase in the number of tenants falling into rent arrears over the past couple of months. We continue to offer support, provide guidance to tenants who are finding themselves in financial difficulties due to the pandemic. And obviously we continue to work very closely with the DWP and the CAB on that. So obviously we will keep you posted on that. You've got the rent arrears policy coming, I think, in January to the committee, so we can explore that in a bit more detail there. I suppose the only other significant thing that's different this time is just in terms of budget and the pressures on the budget. So emergency accommodation for rough sleepers and other homeless families is under pressure. The loss of income from rent and service charges, as I've just mentioned, and also the ongoing loss of income from the closure of our community halls, and obviously, they remain closed. What I would say is there's £23,000 worth of unspent budget, which was allocated by this committee for VE and VJ Day, and that amount will be returned to the member investment pots. It remains unspent. And that is the update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I invite members in, Sarah, while we're all here, do you think it's wise we take a vote on the last point Leslie made about returning the VE and VJ Day money back to the members' investment pot, just in case at some point next week Mr. Birkinshaw has a second thought and says this committee's got to meet again to vote on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a sensible thing to do. Yeah, to get members' agreement that goes back, because obviously it's not going to be used. Yeah.
Right. So the question is, members, the unspent money that was allocated by this committee to celebrate VE and VJ Day for their 75th anniversary. 1 second, Councillor Henry. I'll just let Sarah take note. Be reallocated back to the unspent members' investment pot, so other services committee or possibly this service committee can consider the best use for that money. Right. Before I put the question, Councillor Henry, you indicate to speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to refer you to a remark made by John Mackay earlier on about the difficulty with food banks. Can we look to have a reallocation of some of that money to support the food banks further than we've already done so tonight?
I think we're not in a rush to burn the money. I think they're all getting their £1,670 that this committee's agreed. And now the police are gone, I can safely say this. At our next committee meeting, I plan to mug someone publicly to help our food banks and community hub.
So you've got a night out for yourself planned. It seems, it's £23,000. It's community's money. We've already spent it once and not spent it as such. We have an opportunity, to £1,650. John Mackay has told us very, very colourfully, doesn't go very far. So I think it's an opportunity for us to consider it before we go putting it back in a pot somewhere else for it to drift away on whatever.
Right, Councillor Golden.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think, as I understand it, Chairman, you're just asking that we put this back into the member investment pot. And I'm sure if any members of the committee have any views on the best way to distribute, spend, whatever, they can contact you and discuss that, rather than make a rash decision in terms of allocating money here, there and everywhere tonight. We just put it back in the pot, and then over the next few weeks, we can then discuss the best way to approach that to make sure it's actually making good, it's going to make a difference. I think that's the best approach. It's certainly not going to be lost into the ether.
No.
I second Councillor Henry's motion.
Councillor Rimmer, we don't have a motion, but we have a
second. I've just seconded Councillor Henry's motion.
Councillor Rimmer, Sarah, the reins up. Sarah?
Yeah, just from a protocol point of view, I think if members are going to make a decision on allocating money like that, we need a proper report.
Thank you.
Set out clearly for the rationale to be there for you to make your decision. So from a protocol point of view, I don't think you can make a decision on this tonight. You can't make a decision.
Point of order.
You need to have a
number.
We put forward a motion, and so that has to be heard. I appreciate that's the officer's recommendation, but constitutionally we put forward a motion, and I think we need to vote on it.
Specify anything.
Right, okay, members, please. What this committee is formally agreeing for the benefit of the monitoring officer, whereas it's not we add it after we agree to do something. One moment, Councillor Henry, decides you have to bring it back to committee. So all we're agreeing to do is put the 23,000 back in the pot. Now, if you want something on the work programme to discuss this, I had the good sense to keep the work programme till last. But equally, I know the Basildon Community Hub is obviously going to get called upon. So if we agree now, which we can't because you need a proper report and a bit of due diligence. So that's all we're seeking. So I'm going to take 1 point from Councillor Henry, and I'm going to just put this minor thing to the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and thank you again for the intervention, Sarah. Chairman, I would like to formally request a report into how we can further advance our food banks and support our communities by making use of the £23,000 carried over from VE and VJ Day, please.
Okay,
I second.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on. Before we propose and second things, Sarah, make a note of that. When we do deal with the work programme, you've got Councillor Henry's words there in writing, and he's got a seconder. So those in favour of putting a £23,000 back in the pot, you never know, we might be doing something absolutely spiffing in Pitsea, South East and Langdon. You do not know. So I might be saving you from a bit of embarrassment.
You tried to induce me, Chairman.
Induce
You'll
us.
get me, you'll get me in trouble at half 10 at night, Councillor Rimmer. Right, all members unmute yourself, please. Councillor Gordon, how will
Yes,
you be voting?
support it. Support that.
Councillor Henry?
Go on then. Yes.
That's a yes. Councillor Rimmer, you seduced enough to the dark side to vote for this?
I said induced. In favour.
Thank you. Councillor Schrader?
Favour.
Councillor Cope?
In favour.
And I vote in favour. All I will say is Mr. Birkenshaw's not going to be happy with me if I outgun his fox and he pulls me up next week. So we've dealt with that minor little point. I have some questions for you, Leslie, about this COVID-19 outbreak. Is how effective has the community hub been picking up in loneliness? I mean, on my travels in the summer, I had quite an elderly lady who's a widow, and her late husband was in Bomber Command, helping to express our views to Europe when we last had a dispute with them. And she was very, very sad. She hadn't seen anyone. She wasn't getting any shopping, so I took the lady's number. I gave it to Carol, and the community hub were absolutely brilliant. And that's one person I've picked out. So what are we doing during this winter lockdown, which is far worse because people can't spend any time in their garden, and if you're alone, it must be the worst lockdown of all. Yes, Mr. Wood. So what are we doing with the community hub to reaching out to the very lonely and isolated people? Before you can answer, Leslie, I see two hands, Mr. Wood and Councillor May. You will be called, but Leslie.
Yeah. So we're continuing as we were before. So the befriending calls are going on, and in Sheltered, obviously, they're getting specific attention from the housing officers on their schemes, prescriptions still delivered, and referrals to the appropriate voluntary community sector agencies as appropriate, depending what the issue is, Councillor. So, you know, it's exactly as it was at the beginning of the pandemic. That support is still there, regardless of what it is. And there's some very specialist, you know, like the Happy Hub and some of the other agencies supporting mental health have been absolutely a key partner for us throughout all of this.
One last tiny point, so I know everyone wants to talk, and it's a really important subject. Yes, Mr. Wood, you have to know, and I will call you due course, and as well as Councillor Emma and Councillor Golden. Now, where was I? Yes, now Boris has made some announcements about mixture of people's various households for Christmas. Is it possible we could go away from tonight, muse it over, and work with Grant Taylor to see, with these isolated and lonely pensioners, or people who, you know, they just don't see no one, where they could do something where 2 or 3 of these households could mix Christmas with each other, sort of put them in touch, because at least it's human contact. And being on your own Christmas Day must be terrible. It's just another day. You put on the TV, they're all doing their Christmas thing, and you sat there with your microwave ding-ding meal. Must be terrible if you're on your own, especially this lockdown. So, will you go away next time we meet? I believe it's the 2nd or 3rd of December. With go and talk to Grant and see what you can think about doing. Councillor Rimmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There was 2 points I wanted to make. One was similar to your own, and it was in regard to homeless people in the community and whether something could be done for them for Christmas as well, and in a similar vein, actually. The other one was really, obviously, with the rent arrears that we've been seeing and the uptick on that, for us, that just proves the point that a rent increase at this time is just not the right thing to do. And I think when we're doing when we do reports on these things, it's important to actually look at the impact on the actual households as well in terms of their financial well-being, rather than just the budget of the council. So I am disappointed in a way that we hadn't heard this report before the HRA and the other budget report, so councillors could have made a more informed decision and maybe backed us in actually this rent freeze.
Thank you. Before I go to Leslie O'Shea to answer, off the top of my head, the approximate worst case rent increase this year was £2.50, and over the calendar year, that's £130. This council, nor any other council, will evict someone for owing £130. And equally, we will not evict any tenant who cannot pay their rent. As long as they talk to us, work with us in good and bad times, we will not throw people on the street who cannot pay their rent. But tenants who refuse to pay their rent, because they want the flash new phone or other items that are not essential, that's different. Those who want to pay and unable to pay, they're safe in their house, but they've got to talk to us and we will help them. But those who want to go down Lakeside, blow their rent money on things they shouldn't be spending it on, then that's a different story. Leslie, would you like to come back on the rest of the council members' points with regards to evictions and rent arrears?
Yeah, so I mean, evictions in normal circumstances are very, very low in this council, thank goodness, in single numbers. You know, it is absolutely, we see that as absolute failure if we have to evict somebody. The support is there for people if they want to accept it. It really is, and they will make payment agreements with tenants, and obviously all the referrals there for debt management and that sort of thing. So it is all in place if people will engage with us. So, you know, I can only give you that assurance really, and it is extremely difficult for people at the current time, obviously losing their jobs, being furloughed, perhaps only getting 80%, which is pushing them over, you know, over the edge. So we do recognise that there's no enforcement action, and there's a national cessation of evictions anyway until January.
Just picking up on the point from Councillor Inman, you're very welcome to come in after this. Private landlords evicting tenants because they're facing financial difficulties, you know, the ones I've just described, those who want to pay their rent but are financially unable to. How much pressure do you foresee once evictions start next year when private landlords want to turf these people out? And what pressures will that put on the council to house homeless families with children?
It's very hard to call that. It's very hard to predict, but you know, it's obvious that we are going to see a surge in homeless families without a doubt once that happens. Obviously, we've got a prevention team working very, very hard to keep those numbers as low as possible. Undoubtedly, nationally and locally, we are going to see an increase in homeless families. We're not under any illusions about that.
Councillor, do you want to come back? Was there any unanswered questions on that point?
Yeah, there was just one small one, and it was just to do with doing something for homeless as well for Christmas, really, and yes, to see that that'd been noted and was something that you were happy to look at.
Yes.
So in short, Leslie, you've got to save Christmas from, let's say, Boris being nice. Right, we've got to give Christmas to as lot of people as possible. Now, who was next? I know Mr. Wood had his hand up. Councillor Golden had his hand up. Councillor Henry, did you have your hand up? Right, Councillor Golden.
Just two very quick points. I think firstly, I think we have to be very cautious how we approach Christmas, simply because we don't know what's going to happen once the lockdown eases. We don't know how the tiered system will work. So I would hate to get people optimistic. I mean, I'm forever the pessimist anyway, unfortunately. But on a serious note, we don't know how COVID-19 will turn out over the next 2 months. So I think whilst it's important, absolutely essential, we look at what we can do to support people who are experiencing loneliness, particularly over the Christmas time. I think we have to be very careful and mindful how we approach that. And I know our officers will absolutely do that. Secondly, in terms of loneliness and mental health and such, obviously the Health Partnership Board has been doing work on that, and we're having a summit on that issue on Thursday, speaking with a number of the CCG, Essex Partnership University Foundation Trust, Motivated Minds, a whole range of other people coming together to talk about that very issue. So yeah, that's positive. Of course, we don't have a statutory responsibility for mental health, but I think it's fair to say that everything we do as a council will impact on people's mental health. So That's why we're taking it seriously. You know, we put that money for a mental health hub. We put that forward. I think that was last committee meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong. And that was cross-party supported as well. So I know it's an issue that all 42 of us councillors take seriously. And we will do the best we can, all of us, I'm sure, to support people who are feeling lonely, support people who are suffering with their mental health.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, that's the worst thing. There's no sunlight now, long dark winter nights. You know, it's going to push a lot of people over the edge. So thank you for raising that. Mr. Wood, you've been waiting rather patiently, but I have to give councillors the first bite.
As usual. Thank you. Leslie, the hub that's been running during the COVID, great idea. It's been working very well, and applaud officers who've been running that, etc. Are there any plans for that to be a permanent feature, even when COVID is finished?
Sorry, I missed the button. So there is absolutely no plans for it to cease. I can say that. Obviously, it depends. And lots of those services anyway are available through our customer service centre. So they would be referred to the right departments. So things like collecting prescriptions and food and that sort of thing in normal times is probably not needed. But some of the other things around befriending, absolutely, we would want that to continue in some form. So yes, I think we need to, we're not thinking of ceasing it anytime soon, put it that way.
So it'd be a tailored service according to social needs at the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. A cause for optimism, Councillor Gordon.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? Going once, going twice. Gone. Right. One other point, Leslie. Addictions, because during this lockdown, someone say packed in smoking, or say, for example, down a couple of sherries and it's now becoming a bottle of sherry, and other sort of vices and addictions. What sort of feedback we're getting? Because obviously, I know I put that in a slightly light-hearted way, but with alcohol and drugs, those addictions can lead to domestic violence. During that, Councillor Gordon, I will go in a second. But what sort of feedback we're getting with people with issues where addictions have become a problem, like particularly the drink and the drugs?
Right, so those services are commissioned through county, the drug and alcohol services, and like any of those services, they're in high demand. And I think the waiting time sometimes is longer than we would like, shall I say? So that it's, you know, it's an overused resource. They need more resources. So that's a fact and has been for some time.
Thank you. I'm going to call Mr. Councillor Gordon, Mr. Wood.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Sorry to sort of indicate there and speak again, but this is something we've been talking about in the Health Partnership Forum in Basildon. And interestingly, the valuable source of intelligence has come from our waste management and recycling operatives, because of course they've seen a large increase in bottles being recycled, and using that intelligence to inform public health decision making is absolutely key. So gathering the intelligence is the first issue. The other thing we've got to consider is around the availability of sort of alcohol on demand through delivery apps. So drinking historically has been quite a social occasion. The pub landlord has moderated what people have had to drink, etc., etc., etc. Now people can go on their phone, fire up Uber, Deliveroo, you know, Just Eat, any other number of apps, and have alcohol delivered to their door without even having to get out of their home, and that's quite a concern. So a lot of it ties into reducing social isolation as well. If people aren't lonely and they're linked up with their community and social networks, they've got a better chance at fighting against addictions. So I think it's fair to say increase in alcohol use is definitely there. It's definitely present in Basildon. I think that's a national trend as opposed to something that's specific to Basildon. In terms of how we deal with it, there's two strands. There's obviously services for drug and alcohol addiction. And as Leslie quite rightly outlined, they're incredibly oversubscribed, very complex interventions often, a lot of comorbidities in terms of mental illness and physical health. So that's one side of the picture, and that's commissioned through Essex County Council. The other side, in terms of the public health agenda, and what we can all do is checking on our neighbours, speaking to people, making people feel like part of the community is absolutely key. So I think, just to reassure you, Chairman, it's an issue that's very much discussed at our health forum. It's an issue that we're actively using intelligence that we're gathering from district councils and feeding it through to public health in officers both in Basildon and in county. More can be done, absolutely, but it's incredibly complex. And yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Last speaker, Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood.
Thank you. More of a general question, because I'm sort of asking because I don't know. Obviously, alcoholics and any kind of addicts may have a point of crisis where they need immediate intervention and help. Is there anywhere within the borough that they can get help there and then? Because obviously the crisis could happen any time within a 24-hour period. I appreciate that referrals have to be made eventually, and that's where there's a backlog because there's a great demand for the service. But is there a first aid stop, as it were, for anyone in crisis?
Gareth can answer that if you want.
Please.
So in terms of crisis, obviously it's difficult to define because crisis can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. If someone who is addicted to substances, either alcohol, drugs, experiences a mental health crisis, and then they're incredibly complex to manage and deal with, because obviously the substances will influence on their mental state. And without getting too technical, obviously they need to be in some form of stability before the mental health intervention can take place. NHS 111 is a good number to call, because if it is presidingly the mental health that's the crisis, call NHS 111, speak to them. Obviously advise against going to A&E unless it's an absolute emergency. But in the first instance, call NHS 111. In some cases, they can transfer you to a specialist practitioner. There's crisis teams up and down the country in every single borough. And they will be able to resolve that. In terms of a first aid post per se, there's not at the moment. Over at the Festival Leisure, when it was operational, when COVID wasn't, you had the SOS bus. Full disclosure, I'm a volunteer there, which provided a first aid service for someone who's acutely intoxicated. But I'd advise anyone to in the first instance, call 111 unless it's an emergency, in which case, obviously they would need to contact emergency services. Yeah, sorry to get so technical.
No, thank you for that, Councillor Golden.
That if I get asked or I'm having general conversation, because it's conversation I've had with various people, that if someone's in crisis, there isn't like a drop-in centre such where I need help, go. So what are their options? At least now I know that if they call 111, they'll be referred to somewhere that can possibly get them help there and then when they need it. And that's answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, again, thank you, Leslie, for this item on the COVID-19 update. I appreciate that. Now we shall go to the work programme. Now, going back to item 11, Councillor Henry raised an item to go to the work programme. Can you read that out for us, please, so we can put that onto the work programme, please?
Yeah, Councillor Henry requested a report on how to further advance our food banks and make use of the £23,000 reallocated to the Members' Investment Fund.
Yeah, Councillor Golden?
Could I just ask Councillor Henry a question on that, Chairman, if that's okay?
Through the chair, of course.
Yeah, so I'm a bit cautious about limiting that to, or putting a figure on it, in terms of I wouldn't want to limit the scope. I think it's a really important issue actually to think about how we as a council, and I think I also want to include not just advance but support. So I think I would really like to have a report back on how we as a council advance and support the food banks in the area, and I wouldn't necessarily want to narrow the scope of the officer's report by limiting it to just that money. I don't know whether there may be 2 recommendations needed or such, but yeah.
How about to get universal support, we just take the sum of 23,000 off? So I promise you I'm going to mug someone in front of your eyes at the next meeting.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, you said that there's £23,000 is going back in a pot. I'm asking, you've also stated, and Sarah's backed this up, that we need a report in order to be able to make a recommendation. That's what I'm asking for. So if there is a broader scope for other things, then that's fine, bring that. I'm asking for a report on the state of our food banks and how we can allocate some of that 23,000 or more of it to help people who we've actually heard tonight on video give evidence that enough is just never there.
Okay, I think we've got cross-party agreement, Councillor Henry, that we need a report as soon as it is humanly possible back to this committee on the needs of the food banks. We're just disagreeing on whether there should be a figure against it or not.
Yeah, we also, I need to point out the agenda for the meeting next week is already gone.
Yeah.
So that one's done. So the next report will come to the report would come to the January meeting, which is 12th of January. We'd have a report back then.
Okay.
If that's, but I mean, it's what members want to do, but I would suggest you could have a general report on how the council's involvement in the food banks and what's happening, and then obviously look at the funding as well. So you could include both. I don't know whether Leslie's got an input on that.
Leslie, you've muted yourself.
It's late. Sorry, Chair. I will speak to Grant tomorrow about pulling that report together. I think it's important that members have the broader picture of what's out there at the moment, what's available, what the situation is across the board, not just in the Langdon Food Bank, but so you've got a complete picture so that you're enabled to make an informed decision on that funding.
Okay.
Catch up with Grant tomorrow and we'll bring it to the 12th of January.
Thank you.
You happy with that?
Thank you, Chairman.
That's okay. So rather than have a series of votes, if we can just keep it cross-party before we go to votes. We've just spoken about alcohol and drugs. Sorry, Councillor, you want to come back?
I don't know, we can fit this in afterwards. You were in the middle of a roll there.
No, you go. If there's something
I wanted to talk about an item on the work programme. Obviously, we are in COVID times. Nothing's working the way that anything should be. The point of this committee is to look at what we spend our money on. We spend some of our money on town twinning. I would like an update from the twinning group at some point. I don't know when we're going to squeeze that in, possibly January or February maybe, but I'd like them to be given a slot so that they can come and talk about some of the work that I know that they've been doing, but obviously other members of this committee would not necessarily have vision of. So
that's fine. Okay, yeah.
Squeeze them in.
Can I not give an oral report update at the next meeting in December?
I'm quite sure they could, if we invite them.
Hold on.
No, sorry, Chairman, it's too late. We've already done the agenda, so we can't just put extra items on unless it's urgent business. So no, we can't do it for December.
12th of January. Mr. Wood, I will come to you. I've just got other members. So we've got a review on how we can support the food banks. 12th of January, the town twinning can tell us what they've done with their 12 grand during COVID and other things they've been up to. Councillor Rimmer.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm mindful of the fact that in February, this committee passed the inclusion and diversity policy for 2020 to 2024. Next February will be 1 year on. And I just think it's good to actually keep our feet to the fire on this and do an annual report on that policy. So we're not just shelving it for 4 years and then looking at it again in 2024. So it'd be good to have that on the work programme in February.
Can that be at the February meeting of Housing and Communities, please, Sarah? Yeah. Mr. Wood.
Yeah, just one very quick one. I know that there was on the 2nd December, there's a 6-month update on how the £8,000 for funding the libraries just looks like a typical typing error. 10th of the 3rd, 29.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little point there, just okay. We're due to have updates on strategic asset management, and in February, asset management updates. I know there's been a lot of staff changes in some of those departments, and there's not been a lot of information coming through to the reps. So I just wanted to make sure that we get a decent report on those to look at before the meetings, so that we can have a look at what's going on.
I'm sure that can be dealt with, Sarah.
Yeah, because we've not been able to, as reps, ask any questions due to no core groups for those for about 6 months at least, and even before COVID. So we're pretty much in the dark, to be honest, at the moment. I know there's been a lot of staff changes and what COVID, but we don't know what's going on at all in those two items at the moment. So for me, extensive reports on those would be good. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wood. I'm sure Sarah will take due note of that. Leslie?
I suggest we bring it to a tenant leaseholder panel meeting ahead of bringing it to committee, so you can have some proper scrutiny on it. And apologies, because we're 2 posts down in that area, so
yeah. It's frustratingly understandable, but at the 10 would be great. Thank you.
yeah, no problem.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Wood. Right, where we was, I would like, on the work programme, an update for the most relevant person from county with what we spoke about at the previous agenda item with regards to alcohol and drug addictions, so we can get an update to understand if there is anything we can do to assist the county. Because a recreational drug habit in a well-heeled part of North Essex is very different to a drug habit on the council estate in Basildon, and it has different outcomes. Namely, one can afford the habit and the other one has to burgle and commit crime to feed their habit. There's 2 different effects in 2 different areas, and we would like the opportunity to discuss with them and see how possibly we can improve the services, because when we see an increase in burglary and mugging, it tends to be drugs behind it. So trying to nip that problem in the bud. Miriam, you've been very, Councillor UK, Miriam, you've been quiet. Is there anything you'd like on the work programme?
No, I'd just like to say the library's update, would that also include the 1,000 that we had put to have books with BAME protagonists in it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Put it this way, I got a response back from Joe Ray that county couldn't find a supply of BAME books. I spent 30 seconds, sent it to the appropriate person at county and told them they should use Google. So we saw that problem off before it became a problem. Councillor Schrader, you're another one who's been quiet. Anything you'd like to see on the work programme?
No, nothing that hasn't already been covered off by colleagues. Thank you.
Lovely. So do you want to read out what the bits we're putting on the work programme, and we shall take a vote on it, please, Sarah?
You can take a vote, or it can just be noted as part of the report. You don't need to take a vote on it. It's up to you, really.
Well, we'll take a vote just in case Mr. Birkshaw finds issue, and we've got to have another meeting to put stuff on work programmes. Now he's coming out the woodwork with bits and pieces. So could you read out the things we've agreed today to put on the work programme?
Agreed to have a report on the review of the support to the food banks. We also are having a report on, which will go to the 12th of January. We're going to have a report on invite the Basildon Town Twinning Association to give us an update. And we have inclusion and diversity policy, an update after a year of its approval to the February meeting.
And asking from someone to come down.
We've got to contact someone at county to come and speak to the committee about alcohol and drug addiction in the district.
Perfect.
sorry, Leslie's raised her hand.
We can do that through the Safer Basildon Partnership, Sarah. So I'd suggest that we put that on the meeting when Paula's coming back with the Serious Violence Action Plan. Is that in January?
But Leslie, I want something to come to this committee in due course, because a drug addict who's poor is going to break the law to feed their addiction. So we deal with the crime thing, obviously Safer Bas and everything else. But I think if we can have that discussion in full transparency, we'll probably get the result I think people are looking for.
Yeah.
I saw Councillor Mvu patiently putting his hand up again. Please.
Yeah, it was just something you'd mentioned earlier, Chair, in an earlier discussion about the Purple Pound in respect of the traffic lights and the work on that. I didn't know if that was something you wanted to bring back to this committee for an update on any progress that's made with discussions.
Well, I'm tabling a motion at full council at county next month. So I've decided to go and whack the audit's nest and see what happens. I think after I've whacked the audit's nest, let's see what comes of it and then take it from there. But it does need doing, Craig. It really does. Because people who are blind or partially sighted, they need to be able to cross the road safely. Put those 4 points we've just discussed to the vote. Can everyone unmute for the last time tonight, please? I'll call you up in order. Wait for it. Time. Councillor Golden, how are you voting?
I'm voting for.
Good.
I might
Councillor
just vote
Henry.
against for the sake.
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer.
In favour.
Councillor Schrader.
In favour.
Councillor Yacoub.
In favour.
And I shall vote in favour too. That's your 6 votes unanimous. Thank you for your patience tonight. And I would say have a safe journey, but you know what I mean. And Andrew, get your head down. You look cream crackered.
3 foot to the sofa.
I will get my head down and I will get some sleep.
I'm disappointed, Jeff. If anyone should use the F word on a committee, it should be yours truly. And I've been saving it for the right occasion, and you got away with it.
At least we made it a short meeting for Councillor Gordon.
Did I say the F word? I know.
No, he didn't say the French word.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. What you were talking about. Okay.
Anyway, have a lovely evening and thank you for your attention tonight. Good night and thank you for all your help. God bless.
No, Leslie, nice, Sarah. Take care. Bye, Stephen.